Hey guys. This is part 7 of What If Naruto Had a Dog Companion. Hit like and subscribe if you like this one, and also please check the author in the description. Let's start. Chapter 16. Guruko Stands Tall. Tsunade looked down at her lottery ticket and frowned. She'd won. A couple thousand to be exact. The blonde Hokage looked out of her window at the village below. Fuck. Guruko's brown eyes gazed at the scene before him. His body frozen in shock of the memories assaulting his mind even while his eyes took in his friend. There Naruto stood, bloody and beaten, every inch quivering in the effort to stand. Irika's oversized shirt ripped and tattered to reveal still bleeding gashes. Dust and dirt smeared his face to the point that the dog could not tell where the smudges ended and the black, bruised skin began. Naruto tipped dangerously to one side, blood-red eyes beginning to roll into the back of his head, before he seemed to recover himself and stumbled to an upright position. His feet moved through the dust in a wider stance in an attempt at keeping balance. His left arm hung limply at his side. Across from him Guruko could see the beautiful woman from before, but her face, it was twisted in a maniac-like grin that sent shivers running through the dog's body. That grin made her look like a witch from a child's horror tale. Guruko urged his body to move again. Begged it to move. It felt as if his body was trapped in a genjutsu even while his mind was free from its hold. The woman's lips cracked open to reveal shimmering white teeth as she spoke, but Guruko couldn't seem to hear what was being said. Luscious red lips moved, but no sound came out. Then her mouth opened wider in what Guruko thought was laughter, but he still couldn't hear her. The woman's black shoulder-length hair fell forward with the power of her laughs as she bent forward slightly. And then sound returned. The whiz of metal slicing air. Guruko's eyes widened and he begged his body to move against whatever cursed after effects breaking the memory seal held on him, but it refused to obey. The dog watched helpless as Shuriken sped toward his friend, his packed mate, his companion. Naruto dove towards the ground to his left and ripped a piece of broken prong pipe, the rusted, sharp metal biting deep into the boy's skin as he did. Naruto moved it in front of him, and with reflexes earned from countless hours of practice deflected the majority of shuriken away from him body. Two of them still managed to slip past the exhausted boy's blocks and embedded themselves into his chest. Screaming in pain, Naruto collapsed to his knees, his right hand dropping the piece of metal in favor of keeping him from toppling over. Guruko attempted to force his chakra into the pit of his gut to move faster through his body in the hopes of quickening the side effects as he watched Naruto cough blood onto the ground. Naruto's left arm still hung limp and useless at his side, fingers laying in the dust. Guruko internally screamed in frustration and fear as he watched the woman begin to form hand signs. He was so close. He could see Naruto's blood-red eyes glazing over just 20 feet from him. Guruko pumped his chakra more. More. His muscles twitched in reaction. His body jerked. His claws dug themselves into the ground. Hair stood on end. Ears moved back. Fangs bared. Guruko did not have time to reflect on the memories racing 1,000 miles through his brain. He did not have time to consider what it all meant, or why he'd forgotten in the first place, nor did the dog connect the smell of the beautiful woman to one of the rapists until later. All he knew for certain was that Naruto needed him at that moment. Guruko practically blurred with the amount of chakra circulating in his body as he rushed forward. The beautiful woman's hands formed the finale seal. Earth style. Falling boulder. She cried as the woman slammed her hand down onto the ground beneath her. Loud cracking sounds like thunder echoed above Naruto. The blonde looked up to see large chunks of the two buildings above ripping itself apart. Guruko moved faster. Science smiled wickedly. Naruto's eyes faded to blue, rolling into the back of his head as his body crumbled onto the ground even before the boulders slammed into the earth. Why do I always end up chasing Kakashi's students? Mito Guy muttered to himself as he spread out his chakra to sense Guruko's diminishing chakra trail. The Jounin paused on a rooftop and closed his eyes, body going very still. He did not have a summon who could track like Kakashi, nor was he a sensor-type shinobi, But if he knew the chakra signature like he knew Kakashi's and his dog's, then the man could lock on a follow the chakra even from a great distance away. A few tiles shattered under the power of his chakra-enhanced foot. Guy cringed. The third, fourth, and fifth Hokages all lectured him about overdoing in on the buildings and property of Konoha citizens. He caused the third a lot of paperwork because of it. Guy felt Kakashi's dog about 2 miles off. Guruko's chakra trail veered off toward the Red District. Guy frowned at that. The Red District was closed off years ago by the council due to dangerously damaged buildings. It was a 5-mile stretch of crumbling buildings where druggies, alcoholics, and the homeless resided. Why in the world would Naruto have gone there? Guy leaped with a grace that belied his large muscular build to land at the bottom of an alleyway. A large building stood between him, and he could feel Guruko's chakra resonating on the other side along with 2 others. Something was very wrong though. One of the chakras was extremely weak and flickering with life. He blurred into motion, feet barely touching the walls as he moved up it and over. Guy leaped once he touched down on the roof, and as he made to make one last jump, a large section of the building suddenly crumbled away. What in the blazes? Guy yelled loudly as he leaped backwards and flipped into a crouched position. Guy flipped and free fell headfirst down the wall on the left side of the building before twisting upright and landing without a sound an inch from the wall. Cautiously and with speed, Guy moved to the alleyway the crumbling building pieces fell into. Peeking around the corner, he caught sight of a familiar beautiful jounin named Cyan Fagan who specialized in earth ninjutsu and seal techniques. In front of the woman, a large collusion of the cement roof lay with dust billowing everywhere. The fire escape on the left building was badly bent and misshapen from the falling cement. This is her handiwork then, Guy thought as he analyzed the situation. That's when Kakashi's dog, Guruko, came out of the ground in front of the large pieces of fallen cement. Guy's eyes narrowed as he caught sight of something held in the dog's mouth. A shirt? The dog continued to pull, and the unconscious body of Naruto Uzumaki was dragged out of the earth by Guruko's teeth. Guy's eyes widened as he took in the boy's bloody state. He now knew who the flickering chakra belonged to. You fucking mutt, how dare you get in my way? Cyan yelled, voice dripping in fury. Guruko growled angrily through the mouthful of cloth. The dog pulled Naruto's limp body further away from the demented woman before stepping in front of him. Guy watched the jounin snarl at Guruko and Naruto before her hands sped into a series of seals. Guy recognized them immediately. If Guruko went back into the earth to escape, he would be butchered. Guy blurred into action even as Guruko grabbed a hold of Naruto's shirt, and Cyan finished the last seal. Rising Spikes Jutsu. Cyan hissed, so preoccupied with finishing off Naruto and Kakashi's damned dog to notice another chakra aura. Sharp spikes shot out of the earth directly beneath Naruto and Guruko, or at least where they used to be. Cyan whirled, looking around in panic and anger, before hearing the subtle sounds of someone touching brick. Guy glared angrily at the woman as he held the bloody and broken body of Kakashi's student protectively in his arms from atop one of the misshapen fire escape landings. Guruko stood beside him growling with fangs bared. Guy watched as the woman visibly collected herself and became calm. The 2 jounin, Anbu and former Anbu member, sized each other up. On the one hand, Guy was burdened with protecting an unconscious genin, but on the other, Cyan had near to no chakra left from all the jutsus she'd been spilling out. They were in a desert part of town where no one should have been able to hear or sense them. Even an advanced sensor would have had to have been at the edge of the area in order to find them. Cyan Fagan, Guy spoke loudly but with authority, you have not only been caught attempting to murder a genin of the Hidden Leaf Village, but also a boy previously under the protection and guardianship of the late 3rd Hokage. By law and moral, it is my job to apprehend you for interrogation and then immediate execution. Surrender honorably and accept your punishment. Cyan simply scoffed at him. That thing won't live long if you fight me, you know, Cyan proclaimed. You're too much of an ass-wiping moralist and loyal bitch to the Hokage to allow it to die. You don't have time to fight me and save him. Cyan turned her back to the taijutsu master and began to walk away. Guy's eyes hardened as he watched her. He could hear the ragged breaths of the child in his grasp and looked down briefly to the fever-ridden face of Naruto. He knew what he would do. Guy blurred. Leave Hurricane. Guy called out as he spun and slammed a debilitating kick into the back of the arrogant Jounin. The sound of cracking and splintering ribs echoed in the deserted streets. Cyan screamed as she hit the ground at an awkward angle before rolling and coming up in a crouch holding her sides. Guy landed gracefully on his feet, Naruto still tucked safely in his arms. Or, I can do both. Your mistake was underestimating your opponent and hurting a precious genin of this village, Guy admonished angrily. I've already sent a pulse of chakra through my old umbu tattoo and you are now too injured to get away from them. Hardly. Cyan hissed as she body flickered from in front of the trio. Guruko, wait for the umbu and then follow after the traitor, Guy ordered. For a moment Guruko considered ignoring him and following Naruto to the hospital, but the edge in Guy's voice and the lack of power he had in doing anything to alleviate Naruto's pain caused the dog to falter. Going after Cyan would ensure the bitch got what she deserved. He was one of Kakashi's tracking dogs and he had her scent. So instead Guruko glanced at Naruto's prone form and readied himself. Naruto was strong. Guruko, time and again, was impressed by the boy's tenacity and ability to endure no matter the situation. So he would have to have faith that his friend would still be alive the next time they met. Guruko nodded at Guy, who took to the roofs of one of the oldest sections of Konoha to bring his companion to the hospital. He'd sink his teeth into that bitch and claw her eyes from her skull. Sakura Haruno sighed loudly as she pushed away the drape hanging in front of one of her favorite shops and allowed her gaze to wander as she entered. It was a tea shop whose prices were reasonable and food servings just right for her diet. She was not attempting to lose weight, it was simply a means to conserve her figure and live a healthy lifestyle, at least that's what she told Ino. Sakura went up to the counter and ordered her usual for lunch. A rice ball with bourbon chicken on the side and a hot cup of Earl tea. When they went to this shop, Sasuke preferred shrimp with white rice and lobster sauce on top and a cup of cold sencha tea. Sasuke was not with her now though, he'd quietly refused her invitation and walked off, apparently lost in thought. Sasuke had been worrying her for some time now. Ever since the Forest of Death, when that horrible person Orochimaru placed that thing on Sasuke's neck. She could see the seal caused him a great deal of pain then and now, but the boy was stubborn. He wouldn't allow her to help him. Every time she tried to talk to him, Sasuke closed up or snapped at her. It was frustrating. The team had just patched things up about all the horror that was known as the Forest of Death with Orochimaru and the cursed seal, and then Sasuke's brother had shown up. Sasuke began, just a little, but began to tell her about his problems after the Chunin exam when he showed up. It was as if every time her team managed to take a step forward, someone was always there to rip them back a few steps. Naruto. She'd never invited her other teammate to any of her favorite places and didn't know any of his preferences concerning food outside of ramen. Guilt began to nag at her again. She knew Naruto liked all sorts of teas though. The blonde could often be found with a hot cup of tea on their missions. He brought several individual packets for any trip lasting more than 3 days. His favorite, as far as she could tell since she never asked, was jasmine. He also seemed to really like matcha, cha yen Thai black tea, and Shanghai orchid white tea. 1 cup every morning if the mission was peaceful enough, and the only time he was quiet. She hadn't talked to Naruto in a while. Not since their argument. If you could call it that. An argument required yelling and a lot more talking than what occurred. She hadn't even seen Naruto since the paint incident. Sakura rubbed the inside of her left wrist absent-mindedly. A quirk she'd inherited from her mother. She remembered the hurt look on her friend's face when that bastard of a man threw the tomato at his face. The moment blue eyes looked at her and Ino. She'd felt it. This chasm opened up between them. Thinking back to the last few months, it seemed to her that the chasm had begun to form a while ago, but she'd been too unobservant to notice it. When had it started? She didn't know. It seemed to have formed out of nowhere. Definitely much further back than when Sasuke and Naruto fought on the roof, but how far past that event she wasn't sure. She'd been thinking about Naruto a lot lately, trying to remember when things started changing. It was only now that she noticed how Naruto had been bouncing back with useless babble less and less after she berated him or insulted him. He hadn't been bugging Kakashi to teach him new jutsus nor aggravating Sasuke with challenges since the fight on the roof. Hell, he even backed down the last time Sasuke attempted to fight him. It startled her. No, it scared her that she didn't notice. She couldn't even remember the last time he'd asked her out on a date, which he used to do at the end of every day without fail. At first she'd been happy about the change, really happy. But as things degraded, she wished more and more for her teammate to bug her about those things again. "What do you think is the most annoying thing about me?" Naruto asked quietly. "Well, that's kind of tough. I mean, there's a lot about you that's annoying." Sakura winced as she thought of all the things she'd said to him. She regretted them now. The action undoubtedly having caused Naruto to push more away from her than he'd already been. "Never mind, I know exactly what's wrong with you. You're selfish and arrogant, and always try to be the center of attention. When you told me the other day you wanted to change for the better, I believed you, but you're not even trying. You're nothing like Sasuke and will never be as good as Sasuke." She hadn't meant it. Not a word of it. She'd just been angry at the time, extremely angry, and hurt. It wasn't that he hadn't gotten her a present, it was that he didn't seem to have even cared. He seemed so flippant about blowing her off. She knew he didn't have a lot of money, but a simple homemade card would have made her happy. If he just did what he said he was going to do, she wouldn't have lost her temper. Those words, though, she deeply regretted them. Even if Naruto had been a little more scatterbrained lately, he did not deserve that. When Sakura got a hold of her food, she found a nice seat in a corner of the shop to sit down. She and Sasuke agreed that they'd meet up at the training grounds in an hour, so she had plenty of time. She heard a tinking sound and looked down. Her teacup cracked. Iruka was pale-faced as he raced from rooftop to rooftop. There were still specks of flour on his clothes as the breeze rushed by. An hour and a half passed by in the kitchen with cold French toast before Iruka went in search of his pseudo-brother. When he found the apartment door left wide open and walked in, he nearly had a heart attack. The place was ruined. There wasn't a single thing left unbroken in the apartment. Iruka wasn't sure if he would have been happier to have found Naruto there or not. If Naruto had been hurt or just sitting there shocked, it would be bad, but to now know where Naruto is? Iruka leaped up onto one of the many poles in the village and ran up to the top of it. He searched the roads below for any sign of the boy. His eyes couldn't help but angrily stare at the people below. At every turn, the people of this village managed to somehow in some way mistreat the boy. It was a sad fact, but a fact nonetheless. The paint incident and this current break-in were simply examples of some of the things the villagers would do. As long as he'd known Naruto, he'd been chasing after the boy for one misdeed or another, painting graffiti on any surface he could, disrupting class, dyeing people's hair, leaving harmless snakes in a desk, setting up elaborate traps to trip up his Chunin chasers, turning the classroom completely backwards in setup, bringing hundreds of frogs into the school at night, and letting the teachers discover them during the morning, supergluing all the windows and doors shut, gluing Sasuke to his chair on 3 different occasions, scaring a team of genin in the graveyard once with an elaborate mask and sound effects. The list went on and on. Naruto had been relentless, and Iruka somehow got the job, along with several other Chunin, of chasing the boy down when one occurred. He couldn't help but let a proud smile show. Naruto was far more creative and resourceful than any of his peers, that was for sure. Because of that, Iruka was aware of almost all the places the boy liked to go when he wanted to get away. He wasn't at the old house in the woods Sarutobi promised him, nor was he on the rooftop near the academy whose building had been abandoned because of rat infestation. There was a large rocky land space in the middle of Lake Washi where a stone patio with a wooden roof was built, connected to the shore by a bride. Naruto loved that place not only for its peace, but because it was in the midst of a nearly deserted district. No one went there. It was there Naruto went when he was in an especially foul mood in order to cool off. Naruto wasn't there either. The swing swung in the breeze, empty of any child, and Iruka belatedly realized that his classes started 45 minutes ago. He stopped in and told the head he had an emergency to deal with before taking off again without even taking a glance back. Street after street he searched. The ramen shop, Hokage Tower, Team 7's grounds, and even the boy's apartment again. It was as if Naruto simply disappeared. Iruka went back to his apartment, hoping against hope that the genin was there. He wasn't. Iruka sat on the couch in exhaustion, looking down at his hands. Naruto had Kakashi's dog Guruko with him. He would be fine. His hands began to shake badly. Naruto had Guruko with him. He would be fine. A tremor began to go up his arms. Naruto would be fine. Iruka took a deep breath and rushed back out the door despite his tired legs. A frightening memory sprung to mind as he moved back onto the street. It came from months ago, but current events brought it forth to the surface. The third Hokage's words several weeks after the Rookie 9 graduated. The man's thankfulness to him with tears in his eyes. Before Naruto's graduation, when the third talked to Iruka about the boy, the man was formal and distant. In foresight, he knew the man was gauging him, trying to see if he would hurt Naruto in any way, see past his own stigma that his villagers were good. It wasn't until after graduation that the third truly trusted him. The third told him how close Naruto had been. The deep depression he could see in the child as each year went on. When Naruto was 10 years old, he'd confided in Sarutobi one night on the eve before his 11th birthday that he wanted to die. The confession came from a half-asleep Naruto on the couch beside the third. The man dropped his tea. The cup crashed to the floor, but Naruto didn't notice, already asleep. The old Hokage admitted to Iruka that he'd cried for a while that night with Naruto's head on his lap. The third considered placing Naruto on suicide watch or in the hospital, but ultimately the man knew Naruto would only spiral further into isolation if he did so. Since the third's confession, Iruka kept an even closer eye on Naruto, and slowly those signs of depression the old man spoke about showed themselves to him. When the third passed away, he'd been hard-pressed to find the words to comfort the boy. What do you say to someone whose only anchor for living the first 12 years of their lives is dead? The words seemed to come out. He spoke from his heart, and really that's all Naruto ever wants from anyone. Iruka pushed chakra into his legs, eyes roaming the streets. Naruto, where are you? Iruka thought. You're still too weak. You don't have enough hate. Sasuke took a deep sip of his mildly hot tomato soup while staring at the ground in anger, as the face of his brother sprang to mind. Sasuke, calm down. Even if he gets me, I will protect you. I will never let my comrades die. Sasuke bit his lip, the image of Kakashi, bright and clear in his mind's eye. I look forward to seeing you again, Sasuke, in the quest for power. Sasuke felt his skin crawl as the image of that thing came to him again. Orochimaru. Yet, have both your hatred and your intent to kill wavered because of your fear? Is this the pitiful extent of your existence? The redhead was some dark, horrible power. Gaara. He'd beaten him so easily. Why was he so weak? After all of his training. It was for nothing. Ever since that Orochimaru attacked you, you haven't been yourself. That mark on your skin is hurting you again, isn't it? And it just keeps getting worse. Sasuke put his hands behind his head and gently fell to the ground to close his eyes for a moment. Bright pink hair. Concern. Care. Sakura. You're in no shape to fight, Sasuke. Sasuke, I know that you've barely been able to contain the pain all this time. Stupid Sakura and her idiotic concern. He didn't need help. He touched the mark on his neck. I bet they're really proud of you, Sasuke. Sasuke, the last of the great Uchiha clan, beating up a no-name orphan because he's having a tantrum. Naruto. His body froze. Was he really acting like a child? Does it make you feel better, Sasuke? Does punching me make you feel better than me, stronger than me? Does hitting me and insulting your worthless teammate take the pain of losing your family away? No, it didn't, but killing his brother would make him feel better. Making sure he paid for what he did would make him feel better. Bringing justice upon his brother would make him feel so much better, more complete. He didn't have any obligations to anyone. Not Naruto. Not Sakura. Not Kakashi, and certainly not Itachi. But there's a catch: you have to kill your closest friend. Could he honestly kill Naruto for the sake of power, though? Like Itachi killed Shisui. Could he become like Itachi in order to beat Itachi? I thought of him as strong 'cause like me he grew up wrapped in loneliness and sadness, and yet he kept fighting for himself from inside that core of solitude. But that's not what it takes to be truly strong, is it? You can't really get strong just fighting only for yourself. I swear I'll protect all of you. Naruto. Naruto was so confusing. The blonde kept getting stronger, but he didn't understand how. He was an idiot, a loser, completely inept at every form of the shinobi arts. But, as the curse mark covered his body and he offered to keep Gaara at bay while Naruto got Sakura out of there, he couldn't help but remember the strength and determination he had. He'd been able to stand to help Sakura and Naruto when he'd been unable to help himself against Gaara's attack only a few minutes before. He'd been able to catch Naruto after the blonde was sent hurtling toward the tree to their backs with Gaara's attacks. Was there really something in protecting the people you care about that made you stronger? A true ninja seeks for the hidden meaning within the hidden meanings. In a ninja's world, those who violate the rules and fail to follow orders are lower than garbage. However, those who do not care for and support their fellows are even lower than that. Kakashi. The hidden meaning within the hidden meaning. What was that crap? Maybe your hot's not famous Uchiha clan isn't that great after all. Huh. Next time he's dead meat. Despite the total butt kicking you got this time, right? You saw his hands, right? Old doggy brows probably gets some kind of super duper extra special training, day after day. Even more than you got. Your toast, pal. Things are starting to get interesting. This Chunin selections exam is bringing things to a boil. Naruto. He always managed to get him to continue moving. Always managed to give him that silent hidden message. Work harder, you'll get there. You idiot. I'm me. That's bull. And you're the idiot, you idiot. You're a coward, which Sasuke isn't, so you're not him. I'm not so sure we need to be afraid of this guy. And even if we did hand over the scroll, there's no guarantee that he'd spare us. So even if you were Sasuke, I'd still be telling you that you're an idiot. And maybe, a chicken too. Oh Naruto, this is rich. And you're right. Why bargain when I can simply kill you and take the scroll? He'd been so cocky, acting like Naruto was going to get them killed, when it was Naruto who'd been thinking clearly. And again he talked him down from his emotional high. Get a hold of yourself. Think. Don't panic. We're facing someone stronger than us, but shinobi often come to that point. We can't be afraid in the midst of battle. Sasuke knew Naruto wasn't elegant in speech. The blonde spoke only in hidden meanings. If he tripped up and said something stupid, it was usually because he was trying to say something completely different. Sasuke knew that a lot of the times he missed what Naruto was really trying to say, and could see the frustration on the blonde's face at being unable to say things correctly. Most of the time when he insulted the blonde, it was because he too was frustrated with Naruto's inability to communicate. At least he had an idea of it. Sakura seemed completely unaware that Naruto was trying to say something else. What is it? What have I done towards you for you to be such an ass to me? Why are you so angry with me all the time? What could I have possibly done to piss off your high and mighty ass? He didn't know. Nothing. Everything. Something? He didn't know. Sasuke. I don't want to fight you, we're teammates. Let's just talk, alright? Where had this Naruto sprung up from? Where was the rashness and foolishness? Talk? When had Naruto? But that was just it. Wasn't it? Naruto was always trying to get them to talk. He was always trying to get them to hang out. He was always trying to get them to train with him. Annoying. Hadn't he and Sakura always called him that for how loud and clingy the blonde was? Itachi? Auntie got really angry at me today when I asked her for a cinnamon bun for breakfast, but she's always been really nice to me. Why did she change? Did I do something bad? No, you didn't do anything bad. She's just been depressed for a while over her son's death, and his favorite treat was cinnamon buns. Depressed? Why has she been lying to me about being happy then? Why is she always smiling? When you see a different side of a person, it doesn't mean that they've purposely lied or deceived you, but rather quite the opposite. You've merely dismissed them as a single strand in the bundle everyone is made up as. There are an array of things that motivate a person. Circumstance. Mood. Health. Weather. People. Past events. Relations. Even our own minds can create a situation in which our actions change. How you perceived a person also changes how you see the situation. You saw Auntie as solely a kind-hearted person who is forever in a good mood and never unhappy, thus you ignored the signs that said otherwise. Tachi. I don't really understand. So Auntie is kind-hearted and depressed? She's a number of things, little brother, those are simply a part of her. She's also slightly shallow, but mature. She likes to have money at her disposal, but needs to donate some of it so that she looks good in the eyes of our clan. She enjoys the company of children and thus invites them over all the time and makes them cookies. She became infertile at a young age and never got to have children of her own, hence why she's still kept her shallow trait over the years, because she's never really had to care for anyone but herself. All this is simply the top of a much larger bundle that I have not seen and probably never will. Every person is highly complicated, Sasuke. To believe them to be anything but is a most foolish mistake. Itachi, that man? For so many years he'd ignored all of his brother's advice. Everything that man ever said to him was blocked out fervently. But I won't always be the loser slowing everybody down. You are a loser. Who are you fooling? Itachi had been right. People were complicated. He constantly made the foolish mistake of thinking Naruto was not. How many times had Naruto slipped up like that and admitted he thought he was the loser everybody called him? I'm sorry that I'm not the teammate you wanted. I'm sorry I'm not a genius or talented in any way. I'm sorry I always screw up our missions. I know I'm not a good ninja, but I don't need you telling me how worthless I am when I'm already well aware of it. Naruto was loud and clingy and rash, but he also enjoyed listening to others and liked helping people to the best of his ability. Naruto couldn't stand to see another person in pain. If he thought that the best way to solve their problem was by talking, then he would talk all day, and if they needed to fight, then he could do that too. Sometimes, though, Naruto seemed to turn into something else. Someone else. And Sasuke became afraid of the boy he'd begun to call his best friend. That's my boy. When he's in the room with me, all he talks about is you. His father and mother. Would they be disappointed with him? Was he not doing the right thing? No. He needed to avenge his fallen clansmen. He was honor-bound to. His family wouldn't be able to rest in peace until their murderer paid for what he did. Right. The clan was the most important thing. The clan. You babble on, but you overestimate your abilities and you have no idea of the depth of my own, which is why you're crawling right now. You cling to your organization, to your clan, and your name, but you are narcissistic and arrogant. And you fear what you don't understand. Pure idiocy. Obsessing over worthless things like the clan, you lose sight of what's really important. Premonition and imagination. You can't achieve real change if you're bound by regulations and restrictions. It scared him. Those words. They seemed to be matching up to his own life in so many ways at the moment. To obsess over the clan and see nothing but it. He could see what Itachi meant about what a danger that posed. His arrogance when facing Lee and Gaara proved that. He'd underestimated Naruto as well. And you fear what you don't understand. Pure idiocy. He feared Naruto because he didn't understand the power the blonde seemed to have. He didn't understand how Naruto could improve so much since the academy. It seemed like an inhuman pace. He didn't understand Naruto at all. One day he acts like a complete idiot, and the next he's solemn and weary. Then he goes right back to being the idiot he knows within a few hours. And then he will out of nowhere talk with such wisdom and knowledge, and then trip over his own feet, and then he'll come up with an extremely advanced strategic plan and implement it perfectly, and next he'll ask an unbearably stupid question about the simplest of things. Naruto was a walking web of contradictions. Naruto was not like his aunt, whose traits connected with each other somehow even though it was complicated. The things about Naruto seemed to crash into each other, and hinder, and shadow everything to the point of being indistinguishable. It was almost as if there were two people instead of one. Why did everything have to be so complicated? Itachi, Kakashi, Orochimaru, Sakura, his father, Naruto. All of them seemed to be pulling him in completely different directions, and he wasn't sure how far he could stretch. What was right and what was wrong was so blurred to him right now. Was hunting Itachi the best thing to do? Or was forgetting what that man did and moving on better? Should he train for his own sake and eventually, if fate determines it, fight Itachi? Or was protecting the people he cared about the most important thing to do? Was it really that important that Naruto might be as strong as him? Was it by Naruto's own willpower, or was it his own weakness that allowed Naruto to catch up with him so quickly? Both? Neither? Was he being stupid, like Itachi said, by fearing Naruto because he didn't understand the blonde? Would his family be disappointed in him by his life so far, or be happy? Do they want him to kill Itachi, or did they somehow still love the man even after all that he's done to the clan? He was so confused and weary and exhausted. What was right and what was wrong? He honestly didn't know anymore. He wished all of his thoughts would just give him a rest and quit for the day. I would like to propose an idea to you, Sasuke. 2 people have gone through with a particular ritual to completely seal away a cursed seal given to them by Orochimaru that entails some high risks. Your arrogance is just as large as your predecessors. There are no percentages of risk for this, Sasuke, simply a reading of the soul. The success completely depends on you. In this ritual you will either walk away with your life and freedom, or be devoured by the seal till ashes remain where your body once was. Live or die depends completely on you. Could he go through with the ritual? Was he a good enough person to survive it? Was he so determined to fight Orochimaru's seals that he was willing to risk so much? He hated the idea of anyone manipulating him, steering his thoughts, controlling him like a puppet. He was no one's toy, but was he strong enough to survive this? Then again, this wasn't about physical strength. This wasn't about how strong his emotional front was. The ritual would read his innermost thought, his darkest desires, his whole soul in its entirety. It wasn't about strength of mind or body, but the strength of his soul, and he was not sure he could pass the test. Sasuke, forget about revenge. Although, in my line of work I've seen a lot of kids like you. The fate of those who speak of revenge is never good. It's quite tragic, actually. You'll only end up hurting and suffering more than you are now. Even if your revenge is a success, you'll only have emptiness. Kakashi. Did he want that end? Could he give up everything for revenge? I've lived longer than you. Times were bad back in my day. I know the pain of losing somebody more than I'd like to, but neither you nor I can be called lucky, that's for sure. But we're not the most unfortunate either. You and I have both found precious friends, haven't we? You realize it after you lose them. Chidori was a power I gave you because you found something important. That power is not to be aimed at a friend or used for revenge. You ought to know what that power should be used for. Think about whether or not what I've said hit the mark, or not. Or should he just appreciate the things and people he found after so long of being left alone? Abandon his family's honor and past in the hopes of a brighter future? What was right and what was wrong? He didn't know anymore. Sasuke bent down to pick up his large cup of tomato soup, only for his fingers to touch the cooling liquid on the outside of it. Looking down, he saw a large split down the center of the cup. Moegi carefully braided the flowers she picked earlier that morning into a crown. White, yellow, and purple petals sticking out all over the place. It was rather pretty, and well done if she did say so herself. The 8-year-old hummed as she finished her work on a bench near the hospital. The courtyard, where she technically wasn't allowed to be in cause it was reserved for patients, was the only place in the village where the purple flowers she wanted grew. So she'd hurriedly picked them and then got out of there. There was a pleasant little wooden bench several yards in front of the hospital, thought where those nasty, mean nurses wouldn't pass by. She was supposed to be in school, but her mother insisted that she learn the family business of clothes design rather than those silly knife tricks they teach you at the military school that your father allows you to go to. So her mother dragged her around the marketplace looking for special cloths since her father was away on business and couldn't stop her mother. It had been a long-standing argument with her parents about her choice of being a kunoichi. She knew her mother wasn't attempting to be mean or sabotage her education, but was merely terrified her daughter would come home in a body bag after a mission. It was valid and Moegi understood, so she never go angry with her. A few months after attending the academy, one of her senseis asked to talk to her after class, Kurama-sensei, and told her she had a special talent only a rare few showed. She was a type of shinobi they referred to as chakra sensors. It was when a person was extremely sensitive to chakra auras and chakra use. They couldn't see it, but they did feel it. It was this talent that cemented her belief that she was meant to be in the ranks of shinobi. Moegi ditched her after the first hour though and decided to just ditch school altogether since she'd rather face a fire-spitting rat the size of a horse before her teacher who seemed particularly nasty to late students. KonoHamaru would be so jealous too, though she was sure to get a lecture from Udon. The boy was such a stick in the mud. The boy was filled with surprises though. Udon of all people was the one to come up with ideas for pranks. The glasses-wearing boy seemed rather carefree and fun when he thought they wouldn't get caught. Apparently he had really strict parents that punished him for every small thing wrong he did. So whenever Moegi and KonoHamaru were around his parents, Udon would introduce them as the Hokage's honorable grandson KonoHamaru, and an aspiring kunoichi to be Moegi in order to impress his parents. KonoHamaru said nothing about how much he hated the title and simply acted on his best behavior for his friend's sake. The gratitude in their friend's eyes was enough to know how thankful he was. Udon's parents would gush, pinch their cheeks, and give their son an appraising look. A strong wind blew. Moegi gasped as several of her flowers skittered into its grasp and disappeared. She looked up, ready to scold the shinobi who caused it, because she recognized the traces of chakra in the wind. Instead of scolding, she stood there shocked and horrified. A jounin in green spandex had landed gracefully from the high building nearly 60 feet away for only a brief moment before his figure blurred again into the building behind her. "Ni-san," Moegi whispered. The young girl felt her feet moving fast beneath her before her mind even registered the scene. Her small body slammed into the glass double doors, bursting them open, and looked wildly around. "Ni-san," Moegi called. Noise filled the air as half a dozen doctors and nurses swarmed around a recently produced medical bed. A bloody jounin standing off to the side, keeping out of the way, but eyes narrowed and watching. "Ni-san!" Moegi screamed this time. She pushed her way through the crowd until she stumbled upon the bed and saw her big brother figure there. Naruto lay, raggedly breathing, with blood seeping from various wounds. His eyes were closed tightly in pain. Suddenly Naruto moved his head to the side, causing Moegi to nearly jump back in stupefied horror when Naruto coughed harshly and blood spattered across the white sheets in front of her. Tears sprang to Moegi's eyes as she clasped Naruto's cold, limp hand. "Ni-san!" Moegi choked. "What are you doing here?" a man in a doctor's jacket demanded before turning to one of the nurses. "Get the kid out of here now. I need to get the boy to the ICU immediately." The nurse nodded before gently grabbing a hold of the distraught girl. Moegi ripped her shoulder from the woman and walked with the medical bed as 3 male doctors began to push it down the hallway. She held on tightly to Naruto's hand and shrieked in protest when the nurse from before grabbed her around her waist and heaved her away from the bed. "Let go of me! Naruto and I-san!" Moegi screamed and kicked and punched the poor nurse as the bed with her big brother's body disappeared down the hallway. "You're only causing him to lose his chances of survival with your behavior, child," the nurse called angrily from above her. Moegi stilled. The nurse hesitantly let go of her before straightening and absent-mindedly pushing her strands back. The woman pointed toward a room down the hall. "Stay in that room so that I can do my job, you hear?" the woman asked her sternly. Moegi nodded, stifling a sob. The woman sighed. "I'll tell you when he's in safe grounds." Then the nurse turned and quickly made her way down the hall to where Naruto's body was taken. Moegi shook hard, hugging herself in the middle of the hallway, hoping that it was all just a bad dream and she could wake up. A large hand gently touched her shoulder and the startled child turned around to see the strange, green spandex jounin that brought her big brother figure in. She sniffled loudly up at him. "In times like these it is best that one not be alone to suffer," the man said quietly. "Come. I've already sent a message to Our Lady Hokage. We should wait where we will not hinder the wonderful healers of this hospital." The strange jounin then swept her up in a gentle hug and carried her to the waiting room of the hospital. Moegi sobbed into his chest and told the man how much she loved her Enai-san, and how her Enai-san couldn't die cause he just couldn't. Her hand strayed to her right pocket where her now pink-stained cloth sat. She pulled it out and held it close and trembled. The jounin simply stroked her back and whispered reassurances in her ear. Kakashi Hatake felt the world tilt to one side and stay there. Of all the places his target had to be, it would be some godforsaken boat in some ill-colored sea between the middle of nowhere, and why the fuck are you fighting over this territory? Yeah, that place. 16 targets all located around a seemingly nightmare of an area. Sea by cliffs by ice equals very hard to live in and not so easy to hide in place. Yet for some reason, because there are people here and people are apparently stupid, they are fighting over it as if the ice were gold and cliffs made out of silver. So the opposition, who'd paid an ungodly price, wanted their enemies gone. So his clients had paid an ungodly price so that he could eliminate the opposition who wanted them gone. So that meant 10 high-paid shinobi and 6 fat politicians needed to die so that his clients wouldn't die. All for cold and unpleasant water with nasty, pointy cliffs, and even colder icy cliffs. Yup, that's the gist. So his world was tilting. Kakashi stealthily moved from the deck to below, and moved in on his prey. The last target. The last political enemy. Kakashi slid in beside him, could feel the tense body breathing in and out, saw the wide eyes looking around him wearily. Kakashi had followed the panicked politician as the man realized he was the last target, and attempted to flee the country in a last-ditch effort to save his skin. The body hit the floor before the man even knew he was there. The throat was cleanly sliced in a way that he was instantly dead. Kakashi stretched his muscles and body flickered to the deck once more. He leaped into the air and gracefully landed on the surface of the choppy water. The inhabitants of the boat would never know Konoha was involved, and it would probably take them a little while to even realize that their precious cargo no longer walked among the living. Now he could finally get back to his students. Kakashi began to move with all haste toward his home. He'd had a bad feeling since the beginning of this mission. He'd pretty much left his team to their own devices when they were on less than best terms. Hopefully Tsunade and Jiraiya kept Sasuke and Naruto from ripping each other's throats out. Something else was bothering him though, a lingering feeling that stayed with him for the entirety of the trip, a notion that he'd missed something extremely important before his departure. It didn't matter. In 4 days' time he would be back within the village. If he pushed he'd make it in 3. Kakashi moved a little faster. Walls dripped with water. Pipes ran along the ceilings. The dim lighting flickered. Boiling water sloshed all the way up to his knees. Steam rose up from the hot liquid and caressed his face. Blonde hair felt slick with sweat and condensed water. Naruto coughed and hacked as water entered his lungs. He was so hot, his vision swirled around him, causing him to fall to his knees. Naruto. The demon's voice trilled. Naruto weakly lifted his head towards the voice coming from down the hallway, but didn't move from his spot, mainly because he couldn't. The hot water sloshed lazily against his chest. Naruto pushed against the wall, legs struggling to get up, before sinking into the water once more. Wretched child. I'll drag you to hell with me. The demon moaned. Naruto let his head lean against the seal's walls. Darkness craped from all its corners like arms reaching for him. He watched them, too tired to care, as they consumed the little dim light that resided in the hallways. You're just gonna let it take you, whispered a familiar voice. Naruto let his body slide till he sat in the water, leaning against the wall, water to his neck. His eyes took at the form that mirrored his own. Except with one difference. The eyes were shadowed in darkness. The other Naruto smiled at him even as the darkness drew closer. You're giving up. Just like when you saw Sign in the Uzumaki diplomat's home base. We're going to die as outcasts. Are you content with that? The other Naruto whispered. Naruto simply ignored the thing in front of him and drew his legs closer. A whiskered cheek leaned against a soaking wet knee. Blonde hair dipped into the hot water. The other him walked over to Naruto and bent down in front of him, pushing bangs out of a sweaty face, and forcing a freezing cold hand against a too hot forehead. You've always been weak. Always made me do all the hard stuff. I face sign for you and you can't even fight against her seal. The other Naruto informed. You're nothing but a shadow of me. With that, the darkness finally surrounded the pair and swallowed them. Naruto! Stay with me! A booming voice screamed out. Naruto blinked. And blinked again. He wasn't in the seal anymore. Where am I? The blonde croaked out as he stood up. Naruto held his hands out in front of him. They were fine. He didn't feel sick or hot or even dizzy. He felt fine. Naruto stood up and looked around. He was in a house. Not just any house though, his house. The house the third promised him before he died. It was bright. Naruto shielded his eyes from the light as he cautiously walked through the hallways. Naruto stopped in his tracks when the sound of another set of footsteps sounded. Who's there? The Jinchuriki called out, hand reaching for his kunai pouch only to realize it wasn't there. He could hear the steps getting closer. A woman walked around the corner. Naruto caught his breath and stared in shock. Long flowing red hair fell around the beautiful woman before him, with grayish-brown eyes so intense he felt his insides shrivel up and rush up to his throat. He choked on air as he tried to speak. Mom? Naruto's voice hitched as the word left his lips. Kushina Uzumaki stared back at him with burning hatred. Red hair fell forward as she stepped forward toward him with arms dangling at her sides. Naruto took a step back. You killed me. If you just hadn't been born, I would still be alive. Kushina hissed. I didn't mean. It's not my fault. Naruto defended, voice quivering. Kushina lurched forward, moving like a marionette to its master's whim rather than any of gravity's laws. Everything has always been your fault. The woman spat. If you hadn't been born, I would be alive. Your father would be alive. The village would be so much happier if you would just die. Naruto moved back as Kushina moved forward as if they were performing a strange ritualistic dance. Naruto shook his head in denial. It's not my fault. It's not my fault. Naruto's voice rose in a scream. The house began to crack and shake around them. Dust and debris began to fall from the ceiling. Wood splintered. Glass shattered. Oh, but it is. And you know it is. You can't deny what you did. Kushina hissed as she walked closer. I haven't done anything. I didn't do anything wrong. Naruto yelled. Kushina moved forward, her hunched body leaning until her nose nearly touched his. You did do something awful, Naruto. You lived when you should have died. Kushina snarled. And then they were falling. Naruto felt his body twist and his world spun. He threw his arms out to grab a hold of something, but the house was gone. Let me go! Naruto-ni-san! Naruto felt his body slam against something hard, yet no pain came. Naruto moved his head to the side and then to the other. The academy? He was in one of the taijutsu training rooms. Naruto pushed himself up dazedly, one leg beneath him with the other beside him in an awkward sitting position. It was so easy to fool you, you know. A voice called. Naruto looked up wearily to see the smirking visage of Mizuki. Mizuki, his old taijutsu teacher and his old tutor. Mizuki, the man who tried to kill him the night of graduation. Naruto didn't move. A few weeks of after-school tutoring, that's all I needed to gain your trust. For you to follow my words like a starving dog after meat. You've always been so unbearably pathetic and needy. I wanted to vomit after each session with you. Killing you now will be payback for having to listen to you talk, for having to be near you for all that time. Mizuki moved forward and pulled the large shuriken strapped to his back off and away from his body. The large weapon easily spun in the Chunin's fingers as he brought it back behind him, and like that night Naruto found he held no desire to dodge it. This time Iruka wouldn't save him from death either. You are a monster and no one, not Iruka or the village, will ever accept you because of that. The man spat out. The gray-haired trader's eyes gleamed in wild excitement as he let the large weapon let loose toward its target. Naruto still didn't move and blinked in confusion as the weapon moved straight through him as if made of air. His head turned around and he followed the large shuriken as it slammed into the wall and disintegrated into nothingness. When Naruto looked back, Mizuki was gone and in his place stood. There's so much blood, he needs a blood transfusion. He's also suffered from a minor heart attack from a partially damaged chamber in the right side. Shizen, do you remember how to perform the captive restriction seal? The psychologist who lied to him, who manipulated him, hated him. Naruto stood up slowly as the old man moved to stand in front of him. The old man smiled kindly at him, just like back then, and offered him a hand. Naruto slapped it away and took a step back. Why are you so angry? I offered you something that would take the pain away, the man said softly. You hoped I would accidentally kill myself, Naruto answered. The man only continued to smile. Is that really so different from what you actually wanted? The man asked. Naruto shuddered. No, it wasn't. Not really. I could see it in your eyes even at 9 years old. No one wanted you. Not a single person in the world cared whether you lived or died. You were unnecessary, a burden on the lives of my people because of the danger you posed simply by living. You were a painful reminder of what we lost every time you walked down our streets. The old man's voice rasped. Naruto shuddered again and backed far away from the man. The man still managed to smile kindly at him, though. You should know that it's still true, and there is nothing you can do that will ever make it any less true, the man added. It hurt. It all hurt. He thought he buried these feelings a long time ago, but they were back. All the hurt, all the anger and bitterness felt like it was rising up from the depths of an ocean to swallow him. Naruto breathed deeply, trying to push all of those horrible feelings down beneath his feet where they belong. His heart felt like it was going to burst. The walls of the academy were melting away, but he didn't notice, so focused was he on keeping the pain at bay. It's not true, not anymore, Naruto whispered. I have friends. People I care about a lot. The old man only looked at him with an air of contempt. You care about them, he allowed, but do they care about you? God damn it! Stay with me, Naruto. Please don't give up yet. Bring me numbing medication and ice. His temperature's still rising. He could see his breath, but he wasn't cold. He was warm, more than was comfortable. Naruto looked around wearily to find himself in a street outside his old apartment. Despite his lack of cold, he shivered. Ma's shadowed figure stepped out of one of the alleyways. 2 women, one old and the other young, stood a little ways down the street. The Chunin with blonde hair and gray eyes stared him down from the opposite end of the street with a tomato in hand. Further behind the women and Chunin on either side stood a crowd of dark figures he couldn't make out, but whose identity he knew. The villagers of Konoha. It's because you represent death. You were born in this world to be hated, and no one will ever love you because you are unlovable. Ma's harsh, high-pitched grunt sounded through the streets as if they stood at the top of a mountain. The younger woman took an uncertain step towards him, but the younger one stopped her. You can't, the older said softly, it's him. The younger woman looked towards him with a flash of pity. I know, but he's hurt. We can't just leave him, the younger whispered. The older woman shook her head, eyes cold as she eyed the broken child. He probably started it himself. The older women dragged the younger away hurriedly into the crowd. So the monster is stealing now, any? The blonde Chunin asked mockingly. The girl was right. Pink does look better on you, but we both know why red is even greater. Now why don't you be a good little brat and die already? The young Chunin threw the tomato, but unlike last time it just went straight through him instead of hitting his face. The crowd began to murmur loudly. It seems even children his own age can't stand him. Can you blame them? I wouldn't want to go near the wretch. He had it coming. Look at him, disgusting. Don't go any closer. I say we take an example from that man and... Hey, that's him. Stay away from us. Go away. I heard he's the only one who failed. Serves him right. Just think what would have happened if he became a shinobi. Sure, we're not allowed to talk about it. I told you not to talk to him. If only you weren't here. I hate everything about you. I want revenge. That's him. Leave us. Disappear forever. You are the nine-tailed fox. It was you who killed Iruka's parents and nearly destroyed our village. No one will ever accept you. Naruto spun around, trying to find an escape, but the shadows stood on the roofs all around him as well. Naruto backed up till he stood against the only wall no shadows stood in front of and covered his ears. The shadows began to move closer to him, surrounding him, and their murmurs became even louder, mixed and entangled. One voice. One opinion. One condemnation. One judgment. One court. Konoha. The heat and pain came back at their touch. A scream ripped through his throat. His hands clenched. He was in the streets, no, on a bed. Hands were touching him. Faces above him. All blurred together. Naruto screamed in agony and tried to push them away, but the hands continued forcing their way to him. He looked around. Metal. Needles. Scalps. Knives. Medical devices. He was in a hospital. His chest was open and there was so much blood and it hurt. He tried to move his lips to scream, but nothing came out. His fingers wouldn't move at his own command. They wouldn't move. He couldn't stop him. Why couldn't he move? Oh God, it hurt. Make it stop. Please make it stop. Naruto let out another blood-curdling scream and tried to pull up from the bed, but he was so hot and his body felt as if it weighed a ton. A blonde woman hovered over him with a needle. He wasn't supposed to be awake. The needle was supposed to put him to sleep. Gigi promised he'd be asleep. It wasn't supposed to hurt. He was supposed to go to sleep and wake up when it was over. Blood spurted up and pain, horrible piercing pain shot through his body. His mind automatically told his body that he should be screaming, but still he just lay there, staring up at the operating room's ceiling at the man who smirked down at him. He wanted to stab the man above him. He wanted to cry and sob. He wanted to run away. But his body wasn't responding. A sharp knife came into view and cut into his chest. No, not again. Not again. Not again. Naruto kicked out at someone, but they began to strap his legs down. There was blood. So much blood. He felt tears trickling down the side of his face. The blonde woman was there again. Her voice was incredibly soft as it whispered to him, and he felt warm liquid hit his face. Tears ran down her face as she stared down at him. Oh God! Please make it stop. It hurts. His mind willed his body to fight, to do something, to make it stop. He felt his eyes rolling into the back of his head. Darkness was finally creeping up on him. The medical knife pushed further into his chest. More blood. One of the men carefully pulled out part of his organ, suspending it in the air with a large red thing connecting it to the inside of his body. The main doctor carefully moved glowing green hands under the lifted red thing further inside. The worst pain of his life filled his body to the brim, and finally the darkness came to him. He didn't care if he woke up anymore. The warm liquid fell onto his cheeks. Oddly, he heard chimes. A rather pretty, familiar sound. He stilled and his vision cleared for a second. Soft brown, tear-filled eyes. Then his body convulsed and suddenly all the pain was back and he screamed again. Everything became blurred once more. Febrile seizure. Someone shouted. Something sharp found its way into the side of his neck, and he knew nothing more. Long purple hair fluttered under a cat mask. Guruko didn't even take time to pause as the fourth Umbu joined the squad Guy called. The dog lifted his nose in the air as the scent of early morning grass, dew still on the blades, with just the barest hint of peaches, shifted northwest. Bark broke as the canine used the trunk of a tree to veer in the direction of their target. The four Umbu barely touched the trees as they followed the dog. They were closing in. The smell of sweat was mixed in. The Umbu had used a great deal of chakra when she'd faced Naruto, and Guy crippled her. She was no match for the five of them. It was merely a matter of how fast they caught up. Wolf-san's hands flashed through a series of seals. Guruko twitched a little, but otherwise didn't react as the complex genjutsu settled over the five of them. 2 miles from the target, Lion-san stopped in his tracks, causing everyone else to pause, and signaled to them. Up ahead. 16 meters. Series of traps. Kat-san moved her fingers into one specific hand seal and projected her hands forward. Large seals on the trees began to glow eerily. Lethal seals. 7 of them. 2 options then. If they happened to have a seals expert with them, they could move straight through after they disabled them. If not, they would have to deviate by a whole 6 miles. Guruko growled lowly. No seal master here, but I've got something just as good. Well, go right through this thing, whispered Bird-san. The shortest male of the group stepped forward and placed his hands into a seal familiar to Guruko. A cross. Shadow clone, whispered Bird-san. 7 shadow clones appeared. Guruko saw the man's shoulders slump slightly, but seemed well off despite the advanced, high-taxing jutsu he just performed. Without a word, the 7 clones moved to each of the seals ahead. The group retreated farther back into the woods away from the soon-to-be-detonated forest area. Guruko's ears flinched as a loud explosion rocked the area, followed by a wave of chakra from a triggered jutsu. So-Sign used a combination of delayed and sealed explosives with an earth-style swamp. Damn! That was impressive. Guruko could see the trees sinking into the forest floor before them. That woman was very irritating. She forced them to go around her traps anyways by changing the landscape. Normal swamps were easy to traverse, but those laced with chakra could and would suck a shinobi in by attaching itself to their chakras. Beside him, Bird-san cursed. Guruko agreed, but rather than state that fact, he simply began moving the team in the fastest direction around the traps. If she spent so much time simply trying to delay them, then she must have been really wounded by Guy's attack. When the academy let out, KonoHamaru and Udan went to the tree to wait for Moegi. There were only 2 reasons why one of the 3 of them would be missing school while the other 2 went, and that was if one of them were sick or Moegi's whining mother decided to torment Moegi with fashion, shopping, and clothes. 15 minutes was the open waiting time. If Moegi didn't show up within that time, it meant they would either have to visit her at her home or rescue her from her mother. Udan sat on the swing and began to idly push back and forth while KonoHamaru sat on the ground in an agitated huff. He wasn't really the patient type of person. The time seemed to go by excruciatingly slow for the pair, more so for Udan because KonoHamaru kept asking for the time every 3 minutes, until the glasses-wearing academy student threw it at the other boy's head. When the 15-minute mark ended, they began trudging down the road. The sound of rushed footsteps sounded behind them, but the pair paid little heed. Ninjas seemed to always be rushing everywhere for one reason or another. So it was a great deal of startlement to both boys when a body crashed into KonoHamaru. KonoHamaru let out a manly shriek of surprise and attempted to pull the thing off of him. It pulled at him and he could hear choked whispers as if the thing above him was trying to talk, but couldn't. Finally getting a good look at the thing, he realized it was Moegi. He stopped fighting her as she began to pull him down the way with Udan following behind. They could only see her orange hair and slightly ruffled clothes as her hand continued to tug at him. Moegi, stop! What are you doing? KonoHamaru demanded. Moegi turned, causing both boys to stop and stare. The little girl was a mess. Her hair was in disarray, a large chunk of it falling out to the side, and the left ponytail lopsided. Her eyes were very red and puffy as if she'd been crying for hours, and her lips were trembling as she tried to talk, but failed. It was only now KonoHamaru noticed that his friend's hand that held on so tightly was also shaking terribly. What's wrong? Did something bad happen to your mom? Udan asked. Moegi just shook her head and grabbed Udan's arm as well. She began tugging on the both of them to follow her, and they did. They'd never seen Moegi this bad off before. It took several minutes for KonoHamaru to recognize the path that they were on. They were heading towards the Hokage's tower. They're moving him. Moegi choked out from ahead of them and subconsciously pulled harder to get them there faster. Moving who? KonoHamaru asked. Nah. He's been in the operating room all day, and then that lady came out covered in blood and she said he woke up for a few moments and started freaking out, and something was hurting him. And Moegi blubbered on, crying and choking on her words even as she continued to pull. What's going on? KonoHamaru finally snapped. Moegi spun around. Naruto. He's really sick and hurt Kono. Moegi got out. KonoHamaru froze. Naruto got worse after he left with Irika? The child let the hand not clutched by Moegi clench shut and fingers dig into the skin. He knew he should have stayed with Naruto. He knew it the first time he saw the blonde in the streets, and then that stupid prank yesterday that those stupid girls did. He saw Naruto then, and how badly off he was, and he still just did whatever Naruto told him. If Naruto was fighting a big scary dragon all by himself and on death's door, he would still tell them to go to class or not to worry. That was just how he was. KonoHamaru began to run, along with Udan and Moegi, toward the tower. When they burst through the doors, several frazzled shunin merely looked up before ignoring them. Moegi looked around, unsure of where they were supposed to go, before looking at KonoHamaru and Udan helplessly. Where did they say they were going to bring him to? KonoHamaru asked. The lady said that she was taking him to the emergency care room of the tower, but I don't know. Moegi began, but was interrupted. I know where. I used to live here, remember? KonoHamaru said with a cheeky grin. Moegi smiled as KonoHamaru took them down the left hallway. KonoHamaru then opened up the third door down and brought them to a staircase that went down. Down then right into a second staircase, but even though it was underground, the place was well light and homey. This place was built as part of the living quarters of the Hokage and their family. The emergency care room was built for those of the Hokage and their family either giving birth or in need of medical care for safety purposes. It was believed that an enemy would have a far harder time trying to kidnap a weakened Hokage if they were in a place like this. KonoHamaru explained. KonoHamaru slowed down as they neared the end of the hallway they were traveling down and stared at the door just in front of them. The sounds of voices could be heard behind it. For once KonoHamaru didn't barge in. He understood how terrible the consequences of doing such a thing were. Instead, he motioned for Moegi and Udan to sit in the pair of chairs outside of the room and took the floor. The three waited there, sparely talking or moving as if they feared such normalcy would cause something horrible to happen. An hour passed by without a single person coming from the room beside them. Finally, just before the second hour mark, the door creaked open and a tired-looking brunette woman came out of the room with bloody gloves. The three children stiffened. The woman who KonoHamaru recognized as Shizen stiffly ripped the gloves off and sank to the floor in exhaustion. She did not care where the glove landed at the moment, only that they were away from her. Her hands found themselves on her knees as she breathed deeply in and out. KonoHamaru got up from the floor and very cautiously tapped the woman's arm. Shizen jerked up and glared at the person. KonoHamaru took several steps back in fear, but relaxed as he saw the woman's own features soften in regret. Sorry, she whispered tiredly. KonoHamaru hesitated, looking back at Moegi and Udan, who gave him encouraging nods. KonoHamaru turned back and gently sat in front of the woman. Can you tell us about Naruto and Ai-san? KonoHamaru asked softly. Shizen squeezed her eyes shut, but nodded. We managed to temporarily stabilize him, but it will only last for a week and a half tops. There's a seal on Naruto's body that's trying to kill him. I performed a special seal that slows down the other's effects to a certain degree, but if we can't figure out how to take the seal off, that's killing him in time. Shizen trailed off. KonoHamaru felt numb. He could hear Moegi start to sob again in the background and Udan start to sniffle as the boy held back tears. Not Naruto. Not his big brother. He'd already lost his grandfather. He couldn't lose Naruto too. KonoHamaru tried to breath, but he was having a great deal of difficulty. People began coming out of the room beside him, but he didn't care. He felt Shizen wrap her arms around him, but he didn't care. He distantly could recall seeing the current Hokage, Tsunade, wrap his friends in a tight embrace, a grim expression on her face. He didn't care. He felt as if he was hollow. Numb. He couldn't feel anything. Even when tears fell from his eyes and soaked his shirt, he could hardly be bothered with it. There was only one thing that mattered to him at the moment. He had to see his big brother. KonoHamaru gently pushed away from Shizen and ran towards the emergency care room. Wait! Don't go in there yet! Tsunade yelled at his retreating back. KonoHamaru pulled the door open and rushed inside, Tsunade hot on his heels, but she wasn't fast enough to stop him from seeing. The boy stopped in his tracks and cried out. There Naruto was, but there was dried blood everywhere, and he was hooked up to a lot of machines. A breathing mask covered his mouth, and in 4 drip with a bag of clear liquid sat next to the bed. Naruto was still in Iruka's oversized, and now torn up clothes. The shirt had been ripped open so that Naruto's bare chest was revealed, an ugly black and bloody seal over the area of his heart. Pads were connected to his skin with wires that were plugged into a strange machine making lines. What caught KonoHamaru's eye though were the ribs poking out and the stomach too far in. Dried blood, where now healed gashes lay, stuck to the unusually pale skin. A large trail of hard red liquid started at the blonde's cracked lips to slide down his mouth and neck. Specks of blood from coughing spread everywhere around extremely dirty blonde hair. Naruto's eyes were closed and scrunched up in pain. Sweat poured heavily from the older boy's brow, and his breathing seemed rather harsh. Naruto! KonoHamaru breathed loudly. The boy ran up to the bed and gently shook Naruto's shoulder, but the blonde only winced in his sleep. KonoHamaru took a step back, staring hard at Naruto, before whirling on the woman that stood at the door. Make him better. That's your job, right? KonoHamaru demanded. KonoHamaru saw Tsunade's eyes draw together in irritation and her mouth fall firmly in grimness. The woman walked over to Naruto and stroked the boy's hair out of his face with a loving care before she finally looked KonoHamaru in the eyes. This isn't simply a sickness that came up by chance, boy. Naruto's been sick for years, longer than he's known either you or I. We don't have any information on it. We are working from scratch, and based on how hard Naruto tried to hide it, I'm guessing he won't be willing to tell us anything about it. Tsunade told him sternly. But, a voice sounded from the door. Tsunade and KonoHamaru turned to see Moegi, standing in front of Udon. A look of confusion spread across her face. The Sarutobi, only now remembering that his friends were here as well. Why wouldn't Naruto and Ai-san tell anyone? Why would he hide it if he was hurting? I don't understand. Moegi whispered. Tsunade shook her head in dismay. The seal on his chest suggests that it wasn't Naruto's choice. From what I gather, someone was threatening him with death if he said anything. Apparently someone found out and activated its death sentence. But what else all this may entail, well, your guess would be as good as mine. Tsunade said softly. She did have a few ideas, but she would not mention any in front of these young ones. Is Naruto and Ai-san going to wake up? Udon asked from in front of a tired Shizen. Probably not till later on tonight. Shizen answered. We've only prolonged the seal's purpose. Naruto is still dying. That means he's extremely sick and won't be able to say or do much, Shizen said, attempting to explain current events to the young children. It was painful though, admitting events out loud. While in the operating room and having the realization of what was happening, one could simply focus on the work and ignore said facts until there was no longer anything to do. KonoHamaru glared at the adults in the room. Why are you just standing here then? The young Sarutobi demanded. Find a way to fix him. Make him better. Do something. Don't you care at all? He suddenly felt himself lifted from the ground by a strong hand. His eyes forced to look into a set of furious light brown filled with pain and anguish. Tsunade held him tightly by the front of his shirt with a shaking fist. I have spent the last 5 hours pulling every medical trick out of my ass just to temporarily stabilize him. Shizen performed a dangerous sealing technique that requires nearly every drop of her chakra over a period of 4 hours without a single lapse of concentration. Naruto's heart failed on us twice. He needed a blood transfusion, and his fever was so high we could have baked something on his body. I will not have some snot-nosed brat tell me that I have not done everything in my power to help him. Tsunade seethed. She dropped the boy on the ground and turned toward Naruto. Her hand touched Naruto's cheek and caressed it. KonoHamaru winced and looked away as he saw droplets hit Naruto's face and the hand there start to wrinkle as the last bits of her chakra dissipated. Get out. At least until I clean up Naruto and this room, Tsunade said tiredly. They did. Without a single word more. Moegi gripped KonoHamaru's right hand while Udon took the left. They would wait together. Guruko's teeth ripped into flesh. A scream filled the air. The woman went down hard as a large chunk of her shoulder separated from bone. Guruko let flesh and blood spill from his mouth as Cyan attempted forming a single-handed seal for an earth jutsu. For Ambu surrounding her and heavily wounded, she still refused to give in. She never finished her seals. A sword from Cat-san pierced her hand and pinned it to the ground. Bird-san's kunai touched the base under her chin while Lion-san brought wire out to wrap around the prisoner. Wolf-san whispered into his radio, informing headquarters of the capture of the traitor. Best not allow any chance of escape. Guruko growled, drawing closer. The wolf-like dog lunged forward once more, aiming for the woman's leg, and catching it between his teeth. Biting down hard and yanking upward, the sickening sound of bone against bone followed by a crack echoed in the forest. A woman's blood-curdling scream following suit. Guruko let out a satisfied snicker. He'd not just broken her leg, but done it upwards in the most painful way possible. 3 Ambu stared at him blankly. Guruko simply turned and began trotting back towards Konoha, jaws still dripping with Cyan's blood. The purple-haired Ambu, Cat-san, merely shrugged at the other 3 before explaining. Kakashi's dog. Not Inuzuka's. The 3 Ambu nodded. Hatake was not known for his mercy, especially when one of his own was threatened. The room was clean. Naruto was in a nice, if a bit large, hospital gown. All the blood was gone. Shizen had left her alone with the blonde a few minutes ago. Tsunade silently thanked her. Her hand went to Naruto's pained face and her throat hitched. She felt it constrict unpleasantly as she tried to not let the sob escape. Why hadn't she seen it sooner? She'd seen it, but she hadn't done anything. It was true she'd not known the true extent of his sickness, but she should have tried harder to figure it out. Screw Konoha law. So what if Naruto was a full-fledged adult in the eyes of Konoha? Who cared that he was legally entitled to privacy because of his citizenship? He was a 13-year-old child, for goodness sake. She'd always been against creating ninjas so young. She'd voted time and again to have students stay at D-rank missions for at least 2 years and only C-rank missions for 2 years after that. A medical specialist on each team. That's how it should be. Keep the kids safe, the adults within medical reach, and the casualties down to a minimal. He was still running a fever. His skin was slick with sweat and his face scrunched up with pain. And there was nothing she could do about it. At the moment her eyelids were falling shut from exhaustion and chakra loss. She knew she would have to sleep for several hours before she could start looking for a cure. Knew the sooner she slept the sooner she'd be able to begin, but it was so hard to leave him. Tsunade sighed heavily. Her hand squeezed Naruto's as she stood up to leave, but froze as the hand squeezed back softly. Tsunade turned her neck so fast there was a popping sound. The hand in hers squeezed weakly again. Naruto? Sweetie, can you hear me? Tsunade asked. Glazed, half-lidded eyes opened. Lips moved and cracked. Blood trickling down. Tsunade immediately bent down to hear the nearly non-existent whisper. Oba-chan. The soft voice croaked. Tears came to her eyes and she stroked Naruto's bangs away from his face again as she sat down on the bed beside him. Shhhhhh, don't try to talk. The medicine hasn't even fully kicked in yet. You'll be able to sit up and talk tonight, but not yet. Your body's still exhausted. Tsunade told him softly. Naruto merely nodded in response. The hand that held hers lifted up until it touched her cheek, and he smiled tiredly up at her through the evident pain. Even without your silly henge you're still pretty, Oba-chan. Naruto whispered softly. Tsunade's eyes widened and then softened as Naruto's hand dropped, and his eyes closed in unconsciousness. Naruto. Chapter 17, K-Far 1 Interrogation. She caressed him. Her hands gently strayed, exploring everywhere. His back leaned against something, a cupboard, his skin irritated by the uneven surface. He noticed none of this though because his body felt only the sharp tingle of frostbite. She took his fingers in her hands and turned them over, examining the nasty frostbites that covered them. He whimpered slightly when she bent them tentatively, testing the damage. He had the small inkling that they were in a bathroom within her home, but nothing else filtered through except the stillness of his own body. He'd been moving for so long that it was strange to him, this feeling of inactivity, yet his body felt as if it moved. No, that wasn't right. It didn't feel the same as his feet taking one more step to one more apartment building. It didn't feel the same as curling in a ball beneath an overhang in the dead of night. It didn't feel the same as forcing his fingers to close after they started turning colors. He was still, but his body hurt. It was as if the tiny cells of his skin were moving in opposite directions and was twisting him. That was it. Dark hair cascaded down on top of his chest as she leaned forward and touched her lips to his cracked and bloody ones. He protested weakly, moving one arm in front of him to push her off, as she gently pulled with her teeth. Tears slid down his cheeks at the sudden sharp pain that burst forth from them. She pulled away and dipped her hand into the water basin beside her, pulling out a cloth from its warm depths and bringing it up to his left arm. She'd been doing this for a while, interchanging between washing and warming his frostbitten and starved body to doing strange things that he didn't understand or like. He knew that what she just did was called a kiss, but it didn't look like what he saw grown-ups do to children. Grown-ups kiss a child on the cheek, it was always quick, and they didn't bite as far as he knew. He'd seen grown-ups do it to each other though, this kind of kiss, so maybe he was just being silly. Maybe it wasn't bad. It didn't feel right though. Fire encased his fingers. Naruto let out a moan of pain as she began moving the cloth around his purple fingers. Her hands glowed green as she did this, and even though the pain didn't go away, it did lessen. She offered no words of comfort, and he didn't expect them from her. He long ago stopped expecting adults to be nice to him. He remembered some things that Sakura said to him a few months ago when they were in the classroom after one of his pranks. She'd lectured him about how if you were a good person and did what adults said that they would be nice to you. Sakura was a liar though, it didn't matter how you acted, it was about who you are. He was an orphan with no money or status. He was the one the council wanted imprisoned for simply being alive. Random people he'd never met in his life insulted him in the streets, for no apparent reason. His guardian didn't want him and refused to tell him why everyone hated him. So Sakura was a liar. Sharp brown eyes looked into his before she moved further down and touched his neck with her lips. There was a strange feel there, and he couldn't help but feel disgusted. It felt like she was sucking on his neck. His hands moved awkwardly on the ground as he attempted to pull away from her, but the Umbu's hand simply shot out and held him still by putting pressure on his shoulder. He stilled. She was trained in medical jutsu, and he had no one else to turn to. Stay and endure or leave and die. It wasn't as if she was hurting him. She wasn't hitting him or whacking him with bottles like the drunks in that alley did. She didn't turn him away when he needed help like all those other people did. All she was doing was touching him. He didn't like it, but it was better than any other option. Blood from an open leg wound followed the trail of a woman being dragged into a dark chamber area and shackled to the north wall. Black hair cascaded forward, hiding beautiful features and a twisted smile. Mask-covered shadows bowed to the darkness before retreating from the room with a loud, echoing thud of the chamber door. A bandana-covered head appeared under the only light in the room. Heavy booted footsteps moved closer to the woman and cupped her chin. Pulling the face up harshly to him, the man turned it slowly, as if examining a piece of meat. White teeth flashed in a malicious grin as Ibiki Marino leaned close to Cyan Fagan's face. "Why don't you speak? You're really no fun this way," Ibiki commented idly. Cyan simply stared back up at him with slight insanity creeping into her brown eyes. Ibiki knew the kind. She wasn't all there. Getting her talking would be the easy part. The hard part came in getting her to speak important information and discerning what the important information was among the rubbish. "So that's your attitude? Fine. Then I will make you want to speak," Ibiki stated calmly. Summoning. Torture chamber. Absolute darkness surrounds them for the briefest of moments, and then 4 chains appear out of nowhere and capture each one of the inhabitants' limbs in a tight hold. Light floods the once dark chamber, revealing a large metal cage-like box coming to life and surrounding them. Spikes and sharp metal clock-like devices poke out from its sides. Chains wrap around the box itself, an image of no escape. I'll loosen your mouth. Ibiki whispers, but the words resonate loudly in the torture box. A clock of light appears around the box, and begins to tick ominously, reminding the captor of every second that goes by within the chamber. The floor of the cage chamber opens up. And you'll tell us your secrets. Gears appear within the open flow, like the inside of a clock, and wires spring forth from their mechanisms, as well as the cage itself. The wire wraps itself tightly around its victim, cutting into the skin. Sign screams, her back attempting to arch, but her bounds keeping her body from moving. She gasps for air and glares up at the interrogation specialist. Already pulling out the big guns, Ibiki. My, someone is in a rush. Sign hisses out. Ibiki nods in agreement. You know several of my tricks. I see no point in playing around when the clock is ticking. Ibiki states, gesturing to their surroundings with a smirk. Now, you will tell me how to remove the seal placed on Uzumaki Naruto. Sign smirks. You care what happens to my little Jinchuriki then? The woman asks in amusement. The sound of ticking grows even louder, filling the room to the brim as Ibiki's hands flash through a series of seals. Sign bites her lip and gasps. Just as the wire pulls on Sign, invisible wires tug against Ibiki's skin as well. His clothes, where the unseen metal wraps around him, hug him snugly. The gears begin to move faster, and the wire tightens. The body starts to slow down the gears as they attempt to pull harder. Pain is the most reliable form of communication. Ibiki informs the woman before him. Let me feel your pain too. Are you really so interested in what I've done to the tramp? Sign gasps through the pain. I'll tell. Ibiki allowed his fingers to loosen slightly, but not all the way. Enough to talk, but still tight enough to remind her of what she will face otherwise. Sign smiled wistfully. I remember him coming back to the apartment building once, proudly holding a test with AC on it in his hands. He was so adorable. He came to me and told me all about it, because you see, I am the closest thing he has to family. I indulged him a little, let him believe I cared, and then invited him to dinner in my home as congratulations. He accepted, of course, the desperate little slut. Ibiki continued looking on indifferently, but inwardly he felt unease. During dinner I tore him down. Asked what his friends thought of his test grade when we both knew he had none. Questioned how well the other students did when we both knew they did better. I pondered why the students don't like him and started commenting on his appearance. He's always been so self-conscious about his looks. It was so much fun. Ibiki tightened the wires a bit. Sign breathed in sharply, but never lost the look of twisted pleasure in her eyes. After that he was like putty in my hands. I told him that even if no one else could like or stand him, that I could. I forced him against the wall, but a few short whispers and a hugging embrace stopped his resistance. You should have seen him, Ibiki, so desperate for any kind of affection. I didn't even have to tell him I loved him, just that I liked him, and he was mine. Sign told Ibiki. You molested him during his academy days? Ibiki questioned, refraining from gritting his teeth. On occasions. On others I fucked him, beat him, slept with him, whatever I felt like at the time. Sign answered casually. The wires tightened around them both again. Sign struggled and screamed as the metal cut into her wounded leg. Sweat caused her hair to stick to her forehead as she jerked to the side against the wire. The seal. Sign. How do you remove it? Ibiki repeated. Angry? Sign asked through hard-won breaths. He didn't fight me much. Huff. Huff. He even got me a present, huff, huff, for my birthday once. He cried when I thanked him, you know. Huff. Huff. Didn't put up a fight when I took him. Sign announced with a grin on her lips. Ibiki inwardly scowled. It was going to be a long night of picking up little hints from individual twisted stories. A combination of torture and manipulation to get her to make something slip. And with people whose minds were obviously not all there, it was even harder to tell the truth from lies for biased recollections. The main problem was, he could see Naruto being that desperate. He'd known Naruto as a waiter in a shady bar for 4 years and as a genin for 1. The desperation that surrounded that boy was palpable. Ibiki had known for several years now that the first person to sincerely befriend Naruto would have the blonde's utmost devotion and loyalty. And that was an analysis from a distance. Ibiki tightened the wires. "Jiraiya-sama!" A voice called from behind him. The old white-haired man sighed as he turned his eyes away from the rather large-eyed woman pouring water down her face. "Yeah, that's it." "What is it? Can't you see I'm a little busy?" the man asked in exasperation. "It's Naruto, sir. Tsunade-sama demands your presence immediately to assist the situation." The Chunin, Kotetsu if he wasn't mistaken, said. Jiraiya turned around, annoyance replaced with a deep worry, and narrowed his eyes. "Situation? What's wrong? What happened to Naruto?" the Sannin demanded. "He's in critical condition from both an assault and some type of advanced seal mark on his chest. Tsunade wants you to examine it immediately to see if there is a way to remove it or if you can simply give her more information," the young Chunin explained hurriedly. "Lead the way," Jiraiya responded. The two took off. A grim frown touched his lips as he noticed the young man shaking slightly from nerves. Whatever happened must have been bad. To put Naruto in such a condition when the boy possessed an advanced healing ability would require a great deal of stress to his chakra coils. Any physical assault on the boy, if it posed a threat to his life, would heal instantly otherwise. Jiraiya was surprised that the young man lead him to the Hokage's tower rather than the hospital, but then he remembered the incident Tsunade talked about occurring several years ago. Naruto wouldn't be able to handle it if he woke up within that building and would probably freak out and make healing him dangerous. When they walked in, the two made their way down the two sets of stairs and towards the hall. Shizen and those brats Naruto was fond of were there. Jiraiya felt himself jerk in surprise when Tsunade walked out of the room in front of them. Her diamond was gone, and her henge had fallen. To be forced to use so much chakra. She caught his eye. Jiraiya felt something grip him deep inside. There was fear in those light brown eyes he'd come to love. Fear he hadn't seen since the incident with Orochimaru when the woman stood above his student attempting to bring him back from a faltering heart. "What should I know before I go in there?" Jiraiya asked coolly. Years on the battlefield aided in being able to handle situations, personal or otherwise, with calculation rather than rash emotion. Tsunade was the same. Fever that refuses to break. Difficulty breathing. Body tremors. One seizure with the threat of reoccurrence. Severe internal damage caused by his own chakra attacking his organs believed to be caused by the seal directly over his heart that's been temporarily healed. The process has been severely slowed down from its original intent, to kill him, by a special seal implemented by Shizen. Lacerations have been healed. Bruised cardio muscles healed. One cracked rib healed. All bruising healed. Seal proven to be long-termed, he's had it on him for a few years, not much we can say other than that though. Tsunade finished? The woman wavered as she straightened. Jiraiya didn't hesitate in his steps as he moved forward. He caught the woman and supported her as her eyes became half-lidded and body shook with evident exhaustion. "Good job, Haim. I'll see what I can do. Go to sleep now," Jiraiya said quietly. Jiraiya motioned for Kotetsu to come over and gently picked up their exhausted Hokage. She didn't protest, which more than anything else spoke of how much chakra and physical energy she'd used. The man nervously stepped forward and gently took her from the Sannin's hands. "Take her upstairs to her bed and don't let anyone bother her for anything. Get Genma to fetch Irika Yumino." Tsunade mentioned the man was the only one on Naruto's emergency contact list. Jiraiya ordered. "Shizen, go get some rest as well. I know enough about medical jutsu to be able to tell if something bad is happening. I'll come get you if anything occurs," the man told the Jounin sitting on the ground. He didn't wait to see Shizen get up or the Chunin disappear down the hall with his old teammate, nor did he bother to look at the three pairs of eyes watching his back intently. Jiraiya turned and breathed deeply before opening the door and walking inside. Jiraiya's eyes immediately zoned in on the 13-year-old lying motionless on the bed. He'd long ago lost the instinct to shudder at all the medical equipment attached to a human body. Still, it unnerved him to hear the wheezing breath of Minato's son as his lungs struggled to take in air. Really, it didn't matter how many years of experience one had, it still hurt to lose someone you loved as if it were the first. He was far too old to be losing his godson at such a young age. When Tsunade put the medical clothes on, she chosen a shirt that opened down the middle since the seal was concentrated over the heart. Jiraiya gingerly brushed his thumb over the top of Naruto's eyes before pulling the blanket back to expose the boy's chest. Surprisingly, it was not the grisly black seals that pulsed against pale skin that made him catch his breath. Instead, his hand went to the exposed ribs first. He knew Guruko's explanation of an extended cold had been bullshit, but he'd not thought it was this serious. He could count the 4 bottom ribs, and his stomach went in a bit. The pants were too big on Naruto's frame, so he could tell that even the beginning of the boy's hip bones were visible. Jiraiya forced himself to focus on the seal instead. He could distinctly tell that the large circular seal glowing faintly was Shizen's work. It was quite a beauty, probably a design of Kushina's if he had to guess, with intricate layers and partial designs finished with 2 rings encircling the outsides. A containment seal with multipurpose layers. The current layer most in use was the one designed to slow down the properties of the mystery seal. For general use containment, it was very versatile. Jiraiya placed his hand carefully on the faintly glowing seal in the middle of the containment seal. To fully figure out its dynamics, he would have to force the full seal to show itself. He focused his chakra and allowed it to flow into the seal. It glowed red as it fought with his chakra. Naruto's breath hitched, and the machine monitoring the boy's heart began beating faster. Jiraiya pushed on. Stopping now would only mean having to do this to Naruto again. The seal glowed brighter, and steam began to rise as it burned Naruto's skin. The boy's back arched in pain, and the wheezing breath grew harsher and faster. Jiraiya grimaced in guilt. "Sorry, Naruto," the man whispered as he forced more chakra in. The seal began to expand across Naruto's skin. The boy thrashed from side to side, forcing Jiraiya to keep the boy's body still by holding it down with his other hand. "Just a little while longer, kid, almost done." The seal crawled over skin, the markings spreading all the way across his shoulders and encircling his neck before finally stopping. Naruto stopped thrashing, but his breathing remained labored. The Sannin looked around the room before removing his hand from Naruto's chest. The seal remained. Taking a cloth from a nearby counter, Jiraiya dipped it into a bowl of water placed near the bed. He guessed for relief from the fever. He gently dabbed away all the blood, making the designs clear. Jiraiya cursed loudly as he saw the designs. A 3-part contract seal. Well, it certainly explained a few things. The first portion was a seal similar to the kind Danzo used on his subordinates. A silencer. Naruto wouldn't be able to talk about the contract or what it entailed outside of a certain range from the person who made the contract. The second and third portion was far more mysterious to him. He recognized only a few of their components. A chakra manipulation symbol that was heavily intertwined with the symbol for fire, which might explain the burning Tsunade talked about. And then, strangely enough, a series of key levels. 10 of them, with the last one leading into the third portion of the seal. The last symbol he recognized was the long-term use seals outlining the second portion. The rest of it was unfamiliar to him. Jiraiya took out a pad of paper and began to sketch out the full seal, gently moving Naruto's body when the time came to copy the back portion of the seal. His hand left the sweat-covered back as he carefully placed his godson back onto the bed. Jiraiya stood, looking back and forth from paper to person, before nodding to himself. He had a few contacts that were well acquainted with seals, not to his extent, but still fairly well. The thing about seals was that there were so many to use and manipulate that one seal master knew only a portion of seals while another knew another portion. It all depended on what kind of seal master you wanted to be: containment, storage, medical, elemental type 1 or 2, actually elements or created such as jutsu, soul, separation, mental connection, bounding, Inuzuka, suppression, of chakra, change, appearance, physical/full body, landscape, item, merge, with weapon or otherwise. Blockage, used to disrupt other seals, supplementary body torture, destroying bloodlines, monitoring, silencers, movement. Many times each section leads into the other, intermingling, and dependent of one another. And then when you went into subcategories, short-term, long-term, and permanent seals. Which then leads into the main element being used for the seals: water, fire, earth, wind, or lightning. After that were the finer details such as pattern, design, and whatnot. Each one of the hand seals everyday ninjas used were tiny parts of weaving together a full seal and then using chakra manipulation to move into a certain category. Of course, most ninja were unaware of this, but they knew the gist. It all got very complicated. The point was that there was a good chance one of his contacts knew something about this that he did not. Jiraiya was what one would call a general master. He knew a little of everything, though if asked he would not hesitate to say his favorites were containment and storage. A contract seal fell under body, soul, or medical. Once in a while you'd find one that went into a different section, but it was rare. Jiraiya put chakra into the seal and allowed it to retract. Naruto made a soft noise of protest as the seal burned again, but did not awaken. The man stood straight before walking across the room and opening the door. He peeked outside the room at the three children still waiting. "Shhhhhh," Jiraiya whispered as he waved his hand for the children to come in. The orange-haired little girl shook the glasses-wearing little boy awake even while the third's grandson rushed by him. Jiraiya sat down at a table in the corner of the room, beginning to write out copies requesting his friends' appearances. Iruka walked into the little emergency facility and passed 4 small pairs of eyes to the bed. Behind him Kotetsu Hogane stood by the door respectfully distant as his eyes searched for Jiraiya's form and finding him absent. Iruka leaned forward and watched the air mask fog up with breath before he allowed himself to breathe as well. The academy teacher nearly collapsed into the chair beside the bed and rubbed his hands over his face. He let out a shaky breath that came back in as a shaky sob still covered in French toast batter. Kotetsu remembered Iruka's expectant and weary voice demanding to know what happened the moment the man touched down in the streets in front of him. He'd been hoping Jiraiya could explain it to the academy teacher when they got there, but Iruka's face simply said, "Tell me." It was stern and scared and desperate all at the same time. Dark tresses of hair fell into his eyes as Kotetsu sighed and cracked his neck to relieve some of his pent-up stress. On their way down he received a report from one of Ibiki's men that Kakashi's ninja hound, Guruko, was reporting to one of their men. The dog would be down soon enough. Out of the corner of his eye Kotetsu saw something move. Startled, the young man turned to see a large multicolored toad sitting directly behind Iruka on a small table. Apparently Iruka managed to sit squarely in the line of sight of the toad because it huffed in irritation before leaping to a chair across the room. The third's grandson jumped in surprise, but made not a sound as the summons settled down on the armchair to continue its watch. No doubt the child was used to the odd creatures since the boy spent so much time with Naruto. So Jiraiya was keeping watch. He should have known. Kotetsu strayed for a moment before heading down the halls. If you can't do anything for the injured, then move your ass and do something useful with your time. He'd learned that a long time ago. Sitting and waiting for someone to recover or die just messes with your mind. So he made himself useful, performing his duties around the tower for the rest of the day, until he caught sight of someone in front of Lady Tsunade's office. Sakura Haruno sat waiting for a teacher that would not be coming, completely unaware of the situation downstairs, with hands supporting chin and a bored expression on her face. Kotetsu took several steps back from the rosette before hurriedly looking around the halls. He'd already been growled at by Yumino Iruka. He would not face this. No, absolutely not. He would not face telling the Genin's teammate too. That's when he spotted him. His best friend came around the corner carrying a large box marked storage. Kotetsu forced a smile on his face as he walked over to the shorter man and took the box from him. Izumo nodded gratefully, but there was a suspicious gleam in his eyes. "Our Lady Hokage's apprentice needs to talk to you. She's waiting outside the main office," Kotetsu announced. "Shizen? I thought she was still resting," Izumo mumbled. Kotetsu gripped the doorknob leading up to storage and hurriedly opened it. Just as he was closing the door behind him, he heard Izumo curse loudly from down the hall. It seemed he'd just realized that, no, it was definitely not Shizen. Guruko dragged himself into the makeshift hospital room of the tower. The dog was exhausted, and it showed. His feet barely lifted off the ground and his scarecrow-marked shirt was torn in several places. Dirt and grime lay ingrained in his fur, which felt much heavier than normal. Guruko trudged to the side of the bed in the center of the room. With a great deal of effort he jumped so that his front paws landed on the side of the bed in order to see Naruto. The dog whined at the still form and gently nudged the boy's right cheek with his big, cold nose. Dirt streaked across skin, but nothing twitched and no one murmured in reply. Guruko tried again. Still nothing. A hand suddenly found itself on his head and his fur was ruffled. He knew immediately that it wasn't Naruto's though. Naruto's hand was much smaller, and he stroked his fingers through instead of on top like most. Guruko let his eyes wander to the person, and was not surprised to find Irika staring at him. "Please don't wake him," Irika commanded softly. He said nothing else, simply turned back to staring at Naruto with his much larger hand holding firmly to the smaller. Guilt filled the dog as he remembered his last words to the young academy teacher. "Stop referring to it as a condition. You're making me sound like I'm on my deathbed. And it will only worsen if someone attacks my heart directly. It's not like some Hyuga's gonna come up to me and strike me in the heart on my way to my apartment," Naruto said with a rueful grin. "HMFF," Irika replied. The man turned around and re-entered his kitchen area, placing the pan and milk on the counter, before calling out once more. "Just make sure you're back in half an hour. I'm making French toast." "Thanks, Irika. I'll be back soon," Naruto answered with a small smile on his face. "Nothing will happen. I'll bite any Hyugas that comes close," Guruko cackled out as he followed Naruto out the door. Guruko laid his head on the bed beside Naruto's face so that the majority of Irika's visage was hidden from view. He should have been there sooner. The mask fogged up with each exhale his human took. Feet shuffled and the sound of something hitting the chair behind him caused the dog to twist around and growl. 3 eyes widened in fear while the 4th simply raised a non-existent eyebrow at him. His hackles fell as he recognized the 3 children. Scolding himself for scaring them, and amusing a stupid frog, Guruko patted over with his head bent in apologetic submission. KonoHamaru petted his head in acceptance, and smiled weakly at the dog. "KonoHamaru, Udon, Moegi," Irika's voice sounded from across the room. "I think it's time for you 3 to be heading home, it's getting late. Your parents will be worried." "I'm not leaving Ni-san," KonoHamaru pronounced angrily. "We want to stay," Moegi agreed. "We'll stay quiet and everything," Udon insisted. "You can come back first thing in the morning, but for tonight go home and go to sleep. Not only that, I've met all of your parents. They're not going to be happy with you for staying out this late, and are probably all panicking. Especially your mother Moegi." Irika lectured them lightly. The young girl ducked her head with a bright blush on her face. KonoHamaru looked ready to protest, but Udon grabbed his wrist and pulled him behind the 2 retreating children. "We'll be back tomorrow morning," Moegi called behind her. Guruko and the toad snorted at the same time before giving each other distasteful looks. "He doesn't own any mirrors, you know," Cyan said thoughtfully. "Doesn't like to look at himself. Thinks he's some wretchedly ugly thing that his mother didn't want." "And how do you know that?" Ibiki asked softly, eyes narrowed. They were going around in circles. Gleaming information from her was impossible. Adding more pain was turning out to be pointless. He'd have to come up with another tactic. Combine physical torture with prodding. He already called Yunoichi here, but the man had been in a nearby town and wouldn't be there for at least half an hour. He'd just have to make do until he could physically rip her mind open. He flinched every time he'd go by a mirror while in my home. When I started taunting him about his looks, he crumbled much faster than normal. I was curious, so I pretended to apologize and asked him to tell me what was wrong. He was only 10, still unfamiliar with how I worked, so he explained. He told me he even tried to cut the possession marks off once while in one of the foster homes. He'd do anything to look like someone else, Cyan said with a chuckle. Ibiki quietly noted the age Cyan mentioned. 10. Still unfamiliar with how I worked. Naruto was 10 when he first came into contact with Cyan. I promised him once to permanently change his looks for him with a seal if he did something for me. I dragged him to a party in the Red District, and had him use the transformation jutsu to become a female version of himself. There was a fat, slobby man there who I told him to blow. Cyan snickered happily, clearly enjoying her story, like it was all a big joke. He was sickened. Begged me to let him do something else to get the seal. I refused. He did it too, the little idiot. Vomited for hours in the bathroom afterwards. Dry heaved for an hour or so after that. When we got back and he demanded the seal, I brushed him off. Told him he should have gotten the agreement in blood. Ibiki remained blank-faced as he listened to her words and giggles. His own stomach heaved a little bit. How could Cyan have gotten past his psychological tests for so long? He had each and every Umbu tested every 6 months. Cyan had been in Umbu for 7 years. The seal on Naruto is a blood contract seal then. There's only so long that you can jerk someone around before they lash out at you. Ibiki commented. Oh, he did. He learned quickly how to lie and deceive me and throw back insults for everyone I gave. He even learned how to go against the seal in various ways. Not break it, of course, but he's exploited every loophole it has. Cyan said giddily. The woman clearly enjoyed the thought of a challenge, and Ibiki had to wonder if perhaps Naruto made it worse by fighting. And how did he go against the seal? Ibiki questioned. A manic expression crossed Cyan's face as her lips tugged up in a smile. One of his tactics was avoiding me. Pain radiates in levels that I determine when Naruto doesn't listen to me or avoids me. But he knew I didn't want to be caught, so I never performed it while he was in public. And while I know all of his weaknesses, he also knows mine. He would bargain with me, give me money or even jewels that he stole. He had a lightning seal jutsu once. I don't know where he got it from, that he shoved onto my body and electrocuted me with once when I tried fucking him. Oh. I made him pay for that one. Cyan giggled, eyes distant, not all there. It seemed she didn't even feel the wires digging into her skin anymore. Ibiki's nose lifted in disgust. Naruto eventually even knew what to say in order to make me focus on things other than himself. Cyan continued on, but there was irritation now. He would keep tabs on my husband that I would rather not know about. Twist the game around so that he was manipulating me instead. Little bastard. Ibiki inwardly smiled. That was impressive. He'd have to remember to test Naruto for torture and interrogation skills after all this shit was over with. As soon as he squeezed the information out of her, and Naruto was recovered, he'd take the kid out to a cafe for a nice cup of coffee. So an Umbu captain has been duped by a child? I expected more from someone of your status. He shouldn't have been able to even speak without you knowing about it if he was truly your prisoner for all these years. Clearly the expectations for Umbu operatives is set too low. Ibiki spoke coldly. Cyan snarled angrily, her body straining against the wires, blood slipping down unnoticed as her eyes blazed. So children can be chunin at 6 and Umbu captains at 13, but adults are still always more clever, HM? Children always surpass their masters, and that is why they must not be underestimated. He may have been unwilling, but every trick he used against me is what I myself taught him. I earned everything associated with the title Umbu captain, and no matter my sentence here, I will keep those things to my last breath. The woman hissed. So her position was a soft spot she prided herself in. A point he could exploit. Good. Ibiki popped his neck and rolled his shoulders to demonstrate his care of her temper tantrum. You use the word master as if it is all-encompassing. Ibiki spoke slowly, but deliberately, but there are 2 different meanings. A teacher and an owner are 2 opposing matters altogether. You are most definitely not a teacher, and you own nothing, especially not Naruto Uzumaki. Therefore you are not a master of anything. She smiled knowingly at him, as if she knew some joke that he did not, but he would know by the end of the night. I'm not a bad person, you know. I've done nice things for him for years in exchange for my fun. When he was 11 he came to me with bloody and blistered feet because the soles of his shoes had worn out till they were little more than holes. Well, I healed his feet for him. I even bought him new shoes, in exchange for a few nights of whatever I wanted. You see, it was just business. He was my personal whore, and I gave him shelter and things he needed. Cyan explained. Is that what you tell yourself at night? Ibiki asked. She ran. heedless of corners down narrow staircases. She ran as fast as her lithe, trained body would allow, clipping sharp turns here and there. Cherry blossom strands flew by open corridors till they settled down against a pale face whose frame stood heaving outside one particular door at the end of one secluded hallway. The breaths that came were harsh and uneven, but not from her mad dash. "It's called hyperventilating." Her mind sneered at her. "It's what happens when you realize you're an idiot." Sakura took calm, even breaths as she stood frozen outside his door in sheer terror. As fast as she moved to get here, her body seemed set on staying just where it was at, just outside her vision of the inside. "Move! Do something!" her mind begged. She stepped through. Her body propelled her forward, causing her to stumble into the room. When she looked up, she choked. She could see his ribs. She covered her mouth as her teammate's battered body continued to lift with life-giving air before hitching on the release. His cheeks were red with fever and sweat covered his body, making his straw-colored hair stick to his face. Sakura's legs felt weak under her. She crouched, one hand on the chair beside her and one on the ground, for support. How could she be so stupid? "Look, Guruko, there's some medicine that I've got to pick up for someone on the other side of town after I finish with my meeting tonight," Naruto told the dog. "Meeting?" Sakura asked. "Yeah. There's a meeting at my apartment complex with all the renters. Our landlord wants to discuss adding some improvements to the building, but it would require raising the rent. I can't really afford that, so I need to be there to vote against it. Technically, we aren't allowed to have animals there, and I don't want to take the risk of him accidentally being discovered if they choose to hold the meeting at my place. We decided to pick one of the rooms instead of my landlord's tiny office, but hadn't gotten far enough to pick one specifically," Naruto explained with a sheepish smile on his face. Sakura nodded in understanding. "I'm proud of you, Naruto. You actually thought of something ahead of time," Sakura said with a smile. "So will this medicine help this friend of yours?" Guruko asked. "For a while at least," the blonde answered. "So is this friend of yours really sick?" Sakura asked worriedly. Guruko grinned. "Oh yes, I've met Naruto's friend once. He's very sick. Fever. Vomiting. And a great deal of pain. The brat's too stubborn to accept any type of help though," Guruko said. Sakura's face fell. "How sad, you're a good person for helping him, Naruto. I hope he feels better," Sakura said as she waved goodbye and entered the living room once more. Naruto weakly waved back. How could she not have picked up on that? Guruko was practically taunting her with her stupidity. Sakura hiccuped as she tried to stop the sob from escaping. He'd been sick then, sick much further than that according to the Chunin Izumo. All the time she'd ever spent with him he'd been sick, the academy, their arguments, the bell test, D-ranked missions, wave country, the Chunin exams, waterfall, snow country. Sick. 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 From across the room she could feel her old academy teacher's eyes on her. She knew it wasn't true, but they felt as if they were accusing her. Demanding to know how she could have spent more than a year of close contact with her teammate without knowing, setting up tents, traveling days along the roads to different countries, cooking together, eating together, breathing together, fighting together. Yet she didn't know. She didn't notice. Naruto Uzumaki has been severely sick for a long time. His chakra has been leaking out of the coils and burning his insides. Lady Tsunade has estimated that it started a few years ago, around the age of 10. It recent. Sakura shuddered. The man had gone into details. He told her how it affected his chakra control, his body, his heart. He told her Naruto had collapsed recently in front of a pair of jounin. How an Umbu captain had attacked him for unknown reasons, and it had caused his condition to intensify to the point his body was collapsing. But she should have known all that already. Naruto was her teammate. How could she not have known that he was sick? How could Naruto have hidden it? Fever, vomiting, pain, exhaustion, she'd not seen any of this. Then again, she never touched him outside of hitting or sparring, so she wouldn't know if he got fevers. She never followed him to the bathroom, so how did she know he wasn't in there puking? She always watched Sasuke throughout the day, so of course she wouldn't notice if Naruto was in pain. What didn't make sense was that Naruto always seemed so full of energy. There really was no way that Naruto of all people faked energy. Naruto wore his heart on his sleeve. He was as honest and naive as they came. He lied to you about being sick though, didn't he? He lied to you about the medicine to his friend, right? Just like you didn't know he was studying under Jiraiya of the Sannin until you were studying under Tsunade. Her mind whispered. He simply didn't trust you enough to tell you. And why should he? It's not like you ever showed you cared. You didn't want him getting the wrong idea. When was the last time she'd even seen him? It had been after he'd been hit by the paint. The devastation and hurt she'd seen when their eyes met across the crowd of jeering people caused her to freeze. He'd been really sick then. Izumo said that Naruto's condition had been worsening the last few weeks. And she just, frozen. He'd been sick and humiliated, and instead of going to him she'd frozen. It shouldn't have mattered that they'd been arguing the last few weeks. It shouldn't have mattered what they'd said to each other. Wait. They'd been arguing the last few weeks. Naruto's condition had been deteriorating the last few weeks. Sakura tried remembering the arguments they'd had. Naruto had been defensive the whole time. They were angry when Naruto had taken such a long time to get dog food during lunch and they went into the restaurant without him. Naruto avoided them. Naruto missed training and they'd been angry with him. They avoided each other. He backed down from Sasuke when their teammate challenged him to a fight. Naruto avoided them. She was angry with Naruto when he didn't show up to pick Guruko up like he said he would. They avoided each other adamantly. Oh God! What had they done? A soft murmur interrupted her thoughts. Sakura's head shot up. Guruko, who'd been lying at the end of the bed, jerked awake at the noise. Iruka was standing already, still holding tightly to his old student's hand. Naruto shifted, eyes scrunching up in discomfort, and head turning to the side. Sakura stood up and rushed to the side of the bed. A painful, wet cough came from behind the mask and Sakura began to shake uncontrollably when drops of red liquid splashed against the clear plastic. Across from her, Iruka turned ghostly white before leaning forward, taking the mask off, and supporting his old student as he coughed up blood onto the white sheets. Sakura shook her head in denial before taking several steps back in horror. Naruto's eyes were cracked open, but he didn't seem to be registering anything. Dark rings accentuated pale, sickly-looking skin. He was gasping for air as blood dripped slowly down his chin to fall into the small puddle of blood being absorbed into fabric. What could she do? She only knew small medical tricks. She couldn't even diagnose a patient yet. Something pushed her to the side. As she stumbled back, her eyes landed on her red coat and long white hair. She vaguely recognized Lady Tsunade's right-hand Shizen coming in as a Chunin escorted her out of the room. She never noticed the toad who disappeared when Naruto woke up. He'd been running non-stop to get back to the village, cutting down his time by at least half a day. Exhausted, Kakashi summoned one of his ninja hounds to keep watch as he rolled out a bag and laid down. As he was about to fall into blissful unconsciousness, something bit his finger. Hissing in agitation, his first reaction was to glare at his hound. Shiba just raised a brow at him. Damn. He'd have to get up the effort to actually look at what was biting him. Kakashi turned his head to see a Konoha hawk staring at him with large, black, emotionless eyes. Kakashi groaned. If Tsunade was going to send him on another mission before he even got back from this one, he'd send in retirement papers the moment he was allowed back in the village. Despite what Guy said, youth did not last that long. Kakashi moaned pitilessly as he forced himself up to untie the scroll from the waiting bird. If his little kitties were here, he would never have been caught dead doing such a thing. Being caught would mean he could never pick fun at Sasuke when the boy had his ungraceful moments, or be exasperated at Naruto for his everyday moments. He was pretty sure he could get away with it in front of Sakura because the girl was so unobservant. Why take the chance, though? Allowing his left hand to glow with electricity, he began to read. Oh dear Lord. He'd summoned the man simply by thinking of him. It was Guy's handwriting on the paper. Kakashi sighed in resignation, but was happy about not having to go on another mission. His tired eyes read the quickly written letter. Sitting bolt upright, Kakashi read the letter one more time. "What is it?" Shiba asked in concern. Kakashi didn't answer. Instead, the man rushed to pack his things before taking out a soldier pill. Popping it into his mouth, Kakashi bit down and swallowed. As energy rushed through his body, he turned to Shiba with a solemn yet determined air about him. "One of my kids needs me," Kakashi answered. Chapter 18. Sign gently led the 10-year-old through the door of her apartment. Hands were soft as she removed his clothes. It was all very comforting despite how scared he was. Her eyes were cold brown orbs that looked at him like an animal with their prey, but her touch was anything but vicious. He distantly remembered the Hokage giving him a stuffed frog before embracing him in a hug, but the memory was fuzzy and brief. The constant skin contact of Sign was soothing. It was a sensation he'd never felt before. Two humans simply interacting. He'd craved it for so long. Other children high-fived each other and sat so close at the lunch table that they ended up leaning against one another when talking. Children grabbed each other's hands to lead them places or squeezed a shoulder for reassurance. At the orphanage, children would crawl into each other's beds and talk animatedly under the covers for hours, simply enjoying each other's company, or on winter nights for warmth. They helped each other swim, or tagged each other in games. He wanted someone to play with him, sit with him, help him. He wanted to know what it felt like to interact. He often saw adults lifting their children into the air before hugging them. The jealousy inside him towards the others was like a seething monster clawing under his skin to be free. Hands were intertwined as children were guided home. Sleeping toddlers were held securely against warm, tall bodies that simply walked right by him. He wasn't their child, and he would never be anyone's child. He would never feel that kind of warmth. He didn't exist to them. He was nothing to them. Sign leaned forward, taking him by surprise, crashing messily against his lips. She noticed, though. She knew he existed and looked forward to seeing him. It was uncomfortable, what she was doing, yet the skin contact made him lean forward as well. It was so soft and warm and reassuring all at the same time. She shoved him hard into the bed, causing him to yelp. He tried to get up a bit as panic rose, only for her to push down harder and cut his air off with her lips. Something wet and warm-like touched his teeth, and he squirmed, realizing it was a tongue. He tried to move out from under her, to say he didn't like that, but she gripped his hair and yanked him back into place. Tears came to his eyes at the harshness and pain. He didn't like it anymore. After a while it was finally over, and Naruto Uzumaki lay quietly against Science's body with her arms wrapped tightly around his small frame. The woman's face snuggled against the back of his neck in her sleep, causing him to smile a little, even while tears fell silently down his cheeks. He closed his eyes, imagining that the woman above him was his mother, and that he'd only just then crawled into her bed after a nightmare. If he just pretended that the other stuff didn't happen. Naruto hesitantly reached out and brought the sleeping woman's arm against his chest. Her warmth surrounded him, and for the few moments before he fell asleep he was happy. He was stable again. Sakura let out a shuddering breath as her rumpled clothes shifted with her as she moved her knees to her chest. She was outside the room that Naruto lay awake in. Iruka's soft voice drifted from inside, telling the boy, and in consequence her, stories about his childhood. She'd peeked in twice by now, and both times saw a barely conscious Naruto paying rapt attention to Iruka as the man held his hand and talked. It was so private that Sakura would not dare enter. Every once in a while she would hear a hitch in her old academy teacher's voice before it would steady out. She felt like an intruder in this whole thing, yet to leave would feel even worse, like a betrayal. Midnight had long since passed, and both Tsunade and Shinzen had retired to bed in utter exhaustion, the younger of the two giving her a disapproving glance before leaving. Despite what many said about Tsunade's first apprentice, Sakura always found Shinzen to be cold when she talked to her. It was obvious from the start that the woman didn't like her for some reason. At no other time than today had it been more obvious, though. When Shinzen and Tsunade had come to help Naruto, the Hokage had given her a sad, understanding nod toward her sobbing frame before entering. Shinzen had glared at her. Iruka's soft voice had stopped. Sakura gingerly stood and peered into the room. The man was fast asleep with his head on the bed, still holding Naruto's hand, as the boy stared up at the ceiling. Guruko was curled up on a chair beside the door with his eyes closed, but Sakura didn't know if he was asleep or not. She hesitated before entering the room. At the sound of footsteps, Naruto tiredly turned toward her. His eyes widened in surprise. He opened his mouth to speak, but only a raspy cough came out. His right hand, the one not held by Irika's, immediately went to his throat. Naruto. Sakura's voice trembled. She pulled a chair to the side of the bed and sat down. She knew she looked like a hot mess. Her hair was ruffled, and her eyes red from sobbing. She probably needed a shower too, but somehow she couldn't bring herself to care. Sakura. Naruto's voice rasped. What are you doing? Huff, here? His voice was so tired and the question so honest. There was no anger in it, just confusion, and it filled her with so much hurt. Did he honestly think? Yes. He did. She could see it in his eyes. He didn't understand why she was there. Tears leaked out as she leaned forward and cupped his face. Her lips quivered as she tried to speak, opening her mouth, but nothing came out. She tried again. I'm your friend, silly. Her voice was quiet, as if she feared being too loud would break what was left of her teammate. Naruto stared at her for a long moment, eyes hollow and dark, before shaking his head in the negative. Sakura choked, clasping Naruto's hand in hers in an attempt to will his belief in their friendship into his body through hers. He still stared blankly in incomprehension. His eyes still questioned her presence. I'm your friend, Sakura said louder, trying to will confidence into her words. I'm your teammate. Remember everything we've done together? You, me, Sasuke, and Kakashi-sensei. The four of us on so many missions. It was rough sometimes, and there's no way you could call it easy, but when you get down to it, it was fun. We became friends. You've become one of my best friends. You and Ino and Sasuke. Naruto just shook his head again. Dull blue eyes met with brilliant green for a long moment before they moved up to stare at the ceiling, the faintest hint of a smile on cracked lips. Friends cough, they like each other. You've never liked me? We are teammates, but not friends, Naruto struggled to say. Sakura grabbed the breathing mask and slipped it over his face, hovering over him as he breathed in deep, even breaths. She pressed her lips together in denial and shook her head again. It's not true. I may not like you in a romantic way, but you are my friend, Sakura insisted as Naruto stared up at her indifferently. She wanted to sob, but knew she'd done enough of that. She needed Naruto to know she meant it. She needed him to know she cared. You! Naruto's hoarse voice reached her through the mask. Sakura looked from the limp hand in hers. Truly, care a lot about Sasuke, huh? Naruto chuckled, but it turned into a deep cough. When he looked into her eyes, she saw understanding and hurt. What does Sasuke have to do with being my friend? Sakura asked in confusion. You know, I always wanted to be friends with you, Sakura. But you. Naruto took off the mask so that he could be heard better. His breathing became shallower. Never gave me so much as a second glance, though. I was always the teammate that you admitted existed when I annoyed you too much. Naruto hacked harshly into his pillow, his entire frame seizing up, but when Sakura moved to put the mask back on, he shook his head. Or when I was useful. Maybe if Sasuke hadn't been on our team, we could have been friends, but I don't regret it, being on a team with both of you and Sasuke, but you've always been chasing after him, wanting to know him, wanting to spend time with him, wanting him to acknowledge you as someone important to him. That's not true, Sakura told him, but she knew it was. She remembered the words she said to Sasuke the day they became a team. They rang clear through her skull, mocking her with her own voice. If he had his way, I'd never find love or happiness. He ruins everything. He enjoys tormenting me. Naruto doesn't understand me at all. I can't stand to have him anywhere near me. It's okay, Naruto wheezed out. I understand. Just you and Sasuke, take care of each other. Don't talk like that. Don't say such things. You're gonna be fine. Lady Tsunade will fix this. Sakura begged. And then you and me can become friends, not just teammates, okay? We can talk and eat lunch together and please don't die. Naruto took his hand out of Sakura's and slowly moved the mask back over his mouth. She could tell he was fading from consciousness. His eyelids were closing and the heart monitor was slowing down. Please don't die. Promise me you won't die. Sakura pleaded with him. But he was already asleep. Shibi had dismissed himself hours ago. Kakashi pushed himself to the limit, flipping over tree branches and skidding down mountain cliffs using chakra in order to get to Konoha's gates faster. How could something like this happen? Long-term illnesses don't develop overnight, and he certainly didn't notice anything on their missions or during training. Giant boulder. Step. Step. Leap. Kakashi tried to think back on every mission he'd had with the boy. Images of the boy sparring with Sasuke, arguing with Sakura about Sasuke, abnormally long hours of sleep, possibly? But he would skip sleeping some nights altogether, so it made sense. Them in the hotel, Naruto trying to get his book from him so that he would listen to what the genin had to say, Naruto exasperated with him for being late. Hundreds of images, yet nothing that he could think of that would suggest. Deep drop. Twist. Feet against rock wall. Nothing to suggest he'd been sick. If you can't find something, try looking at it a different way. What did he know about Naruto? The boy craved attention more than anything else. He preferred to sleep during the day than at night. Naruto talked loudly whenever he spoke. He was clumsy. Thump. Kakashi, Sasuke, and Sakura turned at the sound and as one gave a sigh of exasperation. Naruto had managed to trip on a stone in the road, for the third time that morning. The blonde was rubbing his face where he'd hit the ground and glaring at it, as if it had personally decided it wanted to hurt him. Dobe, we don't want you to suffer even more brain damage, so watch where you're going. Sasuke told the boy irritably. You need to be more careful. Ninja are supposed to be observant and agile, so at least pretend you have one of those skills. Sakura scolded. Kakashi said nothing. While unnecessarily harsh, his two students did have a point. Being a clumsy ninja was asking to die an early death. His eyes watched Naruto as he slowly pushed himself up from the ground. He slowly dusted himself off before looking up at them. Sakura-chan, I was being careful. It's not my fault the road has so many stupid rocks. Naruto pouted. And they continued on their way. 2 hours later, another thump sounded. Sigh. A precarious bridge. Note: get builders out in section B54 for repair work. Crash. Kakashi rushed into the living room of the client's house they were supposed to be cleaning to find Naruto on his knees in the middle of 4 broken plates and cardboard box several feet away. His hands were shaking badly. Sorry. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. The plates were on top of the box, but I didn't see them when I pulled the box down. Geez, that scared the crap out of me, he said shakily, gesturing to his shaking hands. It's okay, Naruto, but the money is coming out of your paycheck and I want you to explain what happened to our client. Try to be more careful, Kakashi told. He left the room. His student wasn't a child. He could handle picking up broken plates by himself. He was in a forest now. Tree base. Trunk. Branches. Kakashi had them practicing a chakra control exercise. Lifting a kunai above your palm with chakra. It was meant to exude a great deal of chakra at a time through one's hands, thus increasing the amount they'd be able to put into higher level jutsus. Sakura wouldn't see results for a long time, and the exercise was slightly pointless for Naruto. For Naruto, this exercise was more about learning the control necessary to not blow the kunai up in the air like he'd been doing for the past 10 minutes. Honestly, he'd been trying to tell Naruto how to do it correctly, but the kid just wasn't comprehending his explanations. Naruto simply didn't learn the way he taught. It was frustrating because he knew that Naruto could get this, he simply wasn't getting it the way Kakashi was teaching it. The boy had learned Kage Bunshin from a scroll, so he tried giving Naruto scrolls, but that didn't work. The boy learned Sasuke's Lion's Barrage from seeing it once, but showing Naruto once didn't work. The boy learned stealth by hiding from ninja, but simply throwing blunted weapons at him in training didn't improve his agility at all. He didn't understand Naruto's learning style at all. Kakashi looked back up from his book to see that Naruto was gone. When the sound of puking reached his ears, Kakashi's body flickered and reappeared above Naruto. The boy's hand was outstretched, using the tree as support, as he vomited across the ground. "Naruto, what's wrong?" Kakashi asked, stoic as ever, but inwardly concerned. Naruto spit out the remainder of his lunch before giving Kakashi a sheepish smile. "I sorta, rammed the ring side of the kunai into my stomach while practicing." "Hey," Naruto explained while rubbing his stomach. Kakashi sighed before shaking his head and looking skyward. "If I wasn't already gray-haired, you'd certainly have set a record, kid." Duck. Leap. Land. When Kakashi arrived at the bridge, it was to find, to his vast amusement, Sakura atop the rail trying to engage an irritated Sasuke in conversation, while he stared down at the river below and a fast-asleep Naruto with chin to his chest and his back to the pole. It was to be expected on a Monday. Naruto did God knew what on the weekends and always slept while waiting for the lazy jounin to arrive. The rest of the week Naruto would be wide awake, but Mondays were, as the boy put it, death warmed up just for me. Always the optimist of the group, Team 7 was caught off guard by the solemn phrase one early Monday morning when they'd first become a team. So caught off guard were they that Sakura cracked up laughing, Sasuke nearly tripped, and Kakashi stopped walking to stare at the miserable blonde. Needless to say, they never once questioned why Naruto immediately fell asleep every Monday. They just went with it. Everyone deserved at least some time to be in a dark mood after all. Kakashi stopped on a tree branch with wide eyes staring in shock. It wasn't possible. One moment after another came to mind of Naruto's clumsiness, but they were all distorted now, or undistorted. Kakashi leaped forward again. His mind jumbled with memories and the letter replaying over and over again in his head. Holy shit, so many moments. So many times. Which meant for every moment he managed to see something there was more that he hadn't been privy to. Wind whipped by him, blowing the cold winter with it. December was turning out to be brutal this year. Kakashi hoped that the weather would be the coldest thing he'd experience the nearby future. It was the morning of the third day, and Naruto was finally sitting up. KonoHamaru crawled closer to his big brother figure so that he was practically on his lap. Moegi sat on his other side while Udon sat at the end of the bed. For a moment they could almost pretend they weren't sitting in a medical room and that at any moment Naruto would get up and join them outside in the sun. So she was in Konoha when IWA attacked the land of eddies? KonoHamaru demanded. Naruto smiled tiredly at him. His voice was still very weak, but he was no longer pausing to catch his breath, and he didn't need the mask. He was recovering from the first attack even while his body was still dying on him. Yes. My mom came here under a treaty created by the first Hokage and the Uzumaki clan. During the Third Great War, the Uzumaki clan used barrier jutsus in an attempt to stop invaders from using the land of eddies as an entryway into the Fire Nation. Naruto's voice said softly. Iruka had gone home to get a change of clothes, but both Sakura and Guruko sat quietly in the chairs surrounding the bed. Guruko was silent because he knew Naruto enjoyed talking to the children and had been promising them that he would tell them about his mother for a while now. Sakura was simply too stunned to say anything. She'd been on a team with him for a full year, but hadn't asked about his past nor his home life. So the Uzumaki clan protected us? KonoHamaru asked in excitement. For a while at least. Their barriers held up against the enemy for months, but eventually the Earth Jutsus penetrated them and broke it. The Uzumaki clan and other Eddies clans fought for 8 straight months before they were beaten. The spiral symbol on the backs of all Konoha jackets represents the thanks for my clan's sacrifices. Naruto told them. So there aren't any more Uzumakis around? Moegi asked sadly. KonoHamaru and Udon too looked unhappy about the news. You don't have any family at all? The little girl pressed. No. What was left of the Uzumaki clan was spread to the winds as refugees. That's why people call anyone who goes by the name Uzumaki a Gaijin refugee. outsider from a war-torn country. Naruto explained softly. That's why you said your mom's a refugee? KonoHamaru asked. But what about you? I was born in Konoha and never got to see the land of eddies. This is my home, Naruto told him with a grin. So if the Uzumaki clan was a shinobi clan, does that mean they had a bloodline or animal contract? Udon asked thoughtfully. They were seal masters who were capable of living for 200 years. Naruto told them with a twinkle in his eye. Wow! No way! That's older than Grandpa was. KonoHamaru exclaimed. Way older. Naruto agreed. But I'd bet the old man creaked and groaned better than any old Uzumaki ever could. KonoHamaru smirked and nodded his head in agreement. Naruto tried to sit up more, but pain racked his body. Bending forward and clutching his sides, he let out a strangled gasp. Naruto and I! Moegi shrieks. Immediately Sakura and Guruko are up and beside the bed, but Naruto opened his eyes and shook his head weakly. KonoHamaru was grasping the blonde's forearm tightly as if simply holding his older brother figure would stop the pain. Naruto swallowed dryly, attempting to smile through cracked lips. I'm okay, Naruto rasped. KonoHamaru tightened his grip. Sai and Fuji made sense. That part of the equation made sense to the copycat shinobi. Kakashi knew, as much as he didn't like to think about it, that his student was disliked and even hated by the majority of the village. The other percent simply didn't care either way. The tiny spectrum that did was newly formed and, for the most part, uninformed about the boy. The idea that someone, a jounin from the village, wanted to hurt Naruto was nothing new. Unpleasant and maddening, but not unlikely or unexpected. Nonetheless, if he was within 10 feet of the woman, she would not be able to understand that she was dying by the time he got through with her. He felt his left eye tingle in anticipation. Apparently Obito was all for this plan. They would see it together. Minato would be so proud. He didn't think that would save him from his sensei's wrath when he finally saw him again though. Sasuke Uchiha reveled in the repetitive motion of his stances, knee lowered, hand raised, foot exactly 1 foot and 7 inches apart from the other. Move into the next stance, knee straightened, hand lowered and turned, foot broad and slowly and a small turn of the body in preparation for the block stance. Breathe in. Breathe out. Next stance. No thinking is required, simply muscle memory, everything else is non-existent. Sweat glistened on his brow as the continuous workout caused his taxed body to overheat despite the cold that rustled his clothes. Sasuke had been coming out here every single day since his talk with Tsunade. Far past midnight each night he snuck home for a shower and a few hours rest, then left again. No Sakura to corner him, no girls to talk to him on his way to the training field, none of the rookies to badger him, just him and nature. He'd run out of food earlier than any other day though, and his stomach was begging him to have a nice warm meal instead of the nearby fruits. Sighing in annoyance, Sasuke began to head back to the village. It wasn't like he could avoid the world forever. Walking into town, he took to the roofs to avoid the looks he was likely to get from his smell. Entering one of the finer apartment complexes in Konoha, Sasuke ripped the note left on his door off before heading inside. Tossing it on the table without so much as a glance, Sasuke walked into the shower. Whatever the Hokage or his teammates wanted could wait until he was decent enough for human company. He heard the sounds of feet pattering outside the bathroom door and knew that Ahei had come back. The dog had taken to disappearing for several long days at a time the moment she was healed. The small dog in his pink-haired teammate's care had come up to him one day a few weeks after Kakashi left to inform him of where she disappeared. Apparently she wasn't very fond of him and preferred Pakken and Sakura's company. Sasuke had gladly given his supplies to Sakura, who'd simply taken it wearily after muttering under her breath about going to steal my shampoo too. He neither wanted to know nor ever intended to ask her what that meant. Getting out of the shower, Sasuke found Ahei whining piteously up at him from the floor. She gently pulled on Sasuke's towel in the direction of the door. So Sakura wanted him? Was that it? Sasuke tugged the white cloth from the dog's mouth. Whatever it is she wants, it can wait till I get dressed and have had food, Sasuke answered grumpily. The dog growled low in her throat at him. Sasuke sighed. This is why her preferred cats. There was one memory above all else that was causing Kakashi the most grief. He hadn't even thought. That was no excuse though. He should have. He wasn't superhuman though, things happened. Naruto obviously didn't want anyone knowing he was sick, but he was a jounin, some genin should not have been able to deceive him. On the other hand, Naruto is the only child to have ever escaped Anbu when they pursued him. It had been so obvious though. Dear Kami. He was trying to justify not noticing his student was severely sick around him, and he didn't notice for over a year. Kakashi swallowed hard. He had to own up to this. He couldn't avoid what he had done. No, he hadn't done anything, and that was the point. Kakashi wasn't sure if he was more ashamed of the fact that he paid that little attention to his smallest student, or if he was ashamed of how little patience he had when it came to dealing with them. Minato had always scolded him about how impatient he was to get things done or to move on to the next thing. It seemed all these years he still was like that. That's why Sasuke was such a great student, because Kakashi didn't have to be patient with him. Sasuke simply got it the first time around and kept on going. Minato would have been able to have patience. He showed unbelievable patience with all of them. He never raised his voice like Kakashi did on occasion. He never favored one student over the other. He never taught one without teaching the others. He never pushed his students onto other teachers. He found a way, even if it was severely difficult, to spend equal time with each of his students. What would his sensei say to him if he knew? The memory came back again. Kaka-sensei. Naruto called. Kakashi felt a headache coming on. He almost always got headaches when he talked to Naruto. He scolded himself for thinking like that. Naruto was his student. Even if Naruto annoyed him a little, he still cared about him, and you don't treat people you care about like that. Kaka-sensei. Naruto's unpleasant voice called again. Kakashi cringed. Yes, Naruto? Kakashi asked as patiently as he could. Is it okay if I ask you about something? Naruto asked. Well, you're already asking me something, so yes, go ahead. Kakashi drawled. No, nicer, be nicer. Kakashi scolded himself. Naruto didn't seem to have paid any attention to his tone though. I've got this neighbor that's really ill. She's always getting sick, vomiting all the time, and the acid really hurts her throat. It sounds like it's more grainy as time goes on. Do you know how to stop it? Or make it better? Naruto asked. Why doesn't your neighbor go to the hospital then if she's so sick? Kakashi asked in a bored tone. It's an illness that can't be cured. She's been sick for a long time, Naruto said quietly. Look, Naruto. I'm not a medic. If your neighbor has a problem with her throat, then she should ask the trained hospital staff to tell her how to fix her throat, Kakashi told him. Kakashi knew that Naruto would come up with anything to talk to someone, but this was really ridiculous. Sasuke and Sakura were coming towards them, but Naruto didn't seem to notice. Alright, but she was telling me something this one time about how others react to her. Her voice really annoys her friends a lot. What if the medical staff can't help? How would she fix it or change it? Naruto asked. Don't you think you should be worrying about your own voice first, Dobe? It's not exactly pleasant, is it? Sasuke said, smirking at Naruto when he turned around with his lips curled in anger. What was that, team? Naruto snarled. Oh boy, listen, Kakashi muttered. I said you're tone deaf. Your voice is like glass being grinded together, Sasuke mocked. Naruto snarled and lunged at the taller boy, but before they could come to blows, Kakashi's body flickered between them. I think that's enough. We're done for the day. Meet back here again tomorrow at 8 o'clock sharp, Kakashi told his team. Sasuke chant his agreement before leaving with Sakura trailing behind the boy. Naruto turned to him. Kaka-sensei? What is it, Naruto? Kakashi tried really hard not to let his annoyance show through, but he failed spectacularly. Never mind. Naruto had outright told him he was sick all the time. Naruto had been asking him for help in an indirect way, and Kakashi had essentially told him to shut up. Look underneath the underneath. If it hadn't been obvious before Sasuke opened up his mouth, it should most definitely been after. What other things had happened that he'd overlooked? A set of chunin were staring at him from across the street as he waited for the old woman to finish wrapping the meat he'd bought. As discreetly as he could, Sasuke glanced at them from the corner of his eyes. He wasn't imagining it. They were whispering to each other. "Here you go, young man," the old woman's voice called. Sasuke turned and thanked her before slipping it under his arm with the bag of vegetables he'd bought earlier. Moving further down the marketplace to pick up rice, Sasuke scanned the crowd carefully. No one else was behaving oddly. Maybe he just happened to pass them by as he was talking about the finalists from the Chunin exam, or about the Rookie 12 in general. People, civilians and ninja alike, had come to hold a degree of respect for the young genin after their involvement in the defense against the invasion. Sasuke shrugged it off. Sasuke became weary though when the man selling him rice looked at him strangely. Shoulders tense and mind alert, he slipped a kunai from his hustler into the bags he was carrying for easier access. Fingers touched his shoulder. Sasuke spun, withdrawing a kunai, and disabling the arm. "Ow!" A girl's voice whined loudly. Sasuke stared, startled at the blonde girl before him, then released her. Ino stumbled forward, rubbing her shoulder to ease the ache before bending down to pick up the duffel bag he forced her to drop. Sasuke got there first. She blushed as he handed it to her. That was about as good of an apology as the girl was going to get. Even Naruto knew better than to touch him when he was tense like that. "Sasuke-kun, Sakura's been looking for you, and the Hokage as well," Ino explained. "Why?" Sasuke questioned. Ino swung the bag over her shoulder and fidgeted with the strap. She was avoiding looking at him. "Why, Ino?" Sasuke demanded. She looked at him fearfully before quickly glancing away again. "Naruto, I don't think I'm really the right person to tell you," Ino mumbled out. Sasuke froze. Naruto? Was he hurt? Did he leave the village? Was he dead? How could that happen? They'd only talked a little over a week ago. It couldn't be. An image of Naruto's beaten and angry form on his knees in the dirt came to mind. The fight was the last time he'd seen him. They'd screamed at each other. Well, he screamed at Naruto first, and they'd fought. Sasuke moved closer to Ino and gripped the girl by her forearm. "What happened to Naruto?" Sasuke asked. I really think Sakura should be the one to tell you. I'm taking her fresh clothes right now," Ino said, gesturing to the bag. "You've already told me that something happened to Naruto. You can't simply drop it. Now tell me." Sasuke snapped angrily. Ino flinched, her pale blue eyes still avoiding his tense brown. "Something happened, no one will tell me what, but they called my dad in. Naruto's really sick and apparently it was caused by someone that's being interrogated," Ino told him quietly. "Where's Naruto now?" Sasuke asked. "I'm going there now. Just follow me." Ino began to walk to their destination, but at the heated glare Sasuke shot her, she moved to the roof and picked up her pace. Sasuke's food lay abandoned on the floor of the marketplace. Had Sakura or Sasuke noticed? Clearly not. Sakura was the least observant person he'd ever met. Unless something was thrown into her face, she didn't pay attention to it. Kakashi sighed. That had been a problem he'd faced when teaching her how to dispel genjutsu. You had to notice you were in one in order to get out of it. He'd hoped that she would have applied the skill outside of the area of genjutsu, but he'd been proven time and again that it went over her head. He'd already resigned himself to pointing out how she could be more open-minded in the battlefield and general life uses. Sasuke was a very observant person when it came to noticing things concerning himself. He noticed that the boy seemed to be trying to avoid taking or thinking about other people's opinions and thoughts. Why? He had no idea. He could pretend otherwise, but really he honestly didn't know the logic the boy was using to justify such actions. Perhaps it had something to do with his lack of respect towards others or his attitude. Maybe he thought that if he allowed others to know that he noticed them, it would be admitting he was equal to them. It made his head hurt. So Sasuke and Sakura didn't, or hadn't known anything. No, definitely not. They both may have a bit of a selfish problem going on, but they weren't heartless. Kakashi cringed at his own thoughts. So was he selfish or heartless? Anko smirked at the wretched creature collapsed on the floor. She'd gotten part of the information out of her. It had taken him 3 long days of switching between her, Ibiki and Inoichi, but they'd ripped it from the bitch. She wrote down a report and summoned one of her personal snakes to take it to Tsunade. Naruto had to give her something through an exchange. Their fingers had to touch, and they both had to state a phrase together as the object left his hand and entered hers. The moment the release ritual finished, the seal on Naruto's chest would come undone and release him from the death hold. Anko's foot pushed up against the bloody woman's face. Sign had held onto the information concerning what he was supposed to give her like a starving person holds onto a scrap of bread. She also refused to give them the phrase that needed to be said. Her foot still leaning against Sign's face, Anko pulled out smelling salt from one of her coat pockets. Smiling, the purple-haired woman shoved it up the other female's nose. It took a moment, but the brunette stirred, and when she did, Anko let out roarish laughter as a shriek left the tired, shaken woman before her. Struggling against her chains, Sign thrashed around to get the thing out. When it finally came loose, Anko allowed her to have a few moments of peace, then took it away ruthlessly. Snakes seeped from her sleeves to wrap around the barely conscious victim. Head tilting to one side as she began to fall unconscious, Anko walked up and slapped her. The resounding echo filled the room and had its desired effect. Sign glared hatefully at her through swollen, black, and purple eyes. "You'll never," Sign croaked. "Free him. The Yamanaka is about to take over my shift," Anko whispered playfully as she rubbed Sign's cheek. "But I think I'll stay. I want to hear those delicious fear-filled screams that took so long to drag out of you." Kakashi rushed through the gates of Konoha. The 2 guards didn't even try to stop him, apparently having been warned that Kakashi wouldn't be checking in with them. He headed straight for the Hokage Tower. Tsunade would either be with Naruto or know where he was, so that was his best bet of getting to Naruto the fastest. If he could just see the seal and how it worked, he'd have a much better idea of how he could help. Guy's description of it was less than stellar. Kakashi gracefully dodged Genin, Chunin, and Jounin that were unlucky enough to be in his way. Breathing hard as he came to a stop in front of the wide, double doors of the Hokage's office, he felt his heart being squeezed. His family had been threatened by an outsider, and that wasn't acceptable. Kakashi stood straight and opened up the doors. A sob was stifled as he walked in. Kakashi felt himself go numb as his eyes took in the image before him. Tears fell uncontrollably as Lady Tsunade covered her mouth to stifle the pain-racked breaths breaking free. Papers lay scattered around her and on the floor. Shizen held onto their pet pig in a grip that seemed suffocating as she stared at the ground blankly. "No," Kakashi whispered brokenly. Sasuke felt a sickening sensation with every level down they traveled. "Chuji and Shikamaru don't know yet," Ino told him quietly. "They went to some town on the edge of the Fire Nation with Shikamaru's mother. They were going furniture shopping, of all things, and Mrs. Nara told them that she wasn't going to do it for them, so they had to go along. It's Saturday though, and they said that no matter what they would be back by Saturday, so they'll be here at any time." Sasuke wasn't really paying attention though. He didn't care if they were here or not. He just wanted to know that Naruto was going to be okay. What if their fight had somehow caused this? What if he'd hurt Naruto to the point that he couldn't defend himself against whoever made him sick? Ino kept talking. "Karinia's team won't be back until tomorrow. They'd been on some long recon mission for a client that wanted them to spy on her husband. Niji's been down to visit though. I was really surprised by that. I didn't know they were close." They finally came to a hall where the door at the end was left wide open. Sasuke sped up without so much as a glance towards Ino. Reaching the door, he entered. The floor was unhooked. The air mask sat being used on a bed that looked made. The chairs were empty. Naruto wasn't inside. No one was. That's it for part 7. Thank you for watching and see you in the next video.